Okay, good morning. My name is Robert Little. I am the administrator for the Plant Industry Division. I guess what I'd like to do is start off a little bit, and we'll do some introductions and some stuff here in a second. We are recording this meeting. I'd like to mention this meeting is not a formal workshop or hearing for regulation change. This is just a public meeting that the Department of Agriculture wanted to provide or have so we could solicit some comment and talk about some of the NRS regulation changes that we have put forward to the legislature in a BDR, and that's BDR 49-176 that will be looked at in this upcoming legislative session. Before we get into the meat of all of this and start talking about it a little bit, I wanted to maybe, I don't know, we've got quite a few people here in our Sparks office, a number of people in our Las Vegas office, and a couple also in our Elko office where this is being video conference to. Len, what do you think? We should do some introductions first before we go into
great. I think just everybody know who's here.
Okay, so as I said, my name is Robert Little. I am the administrator for the Plant Industry Division, and to my left, and we'll just go around the table.
I'm Len Hetrick, Deputy Director, Department of Ag.
Brett Allen, Environmental Services, Department of Agriculture.
Melody Hefner, University of Nevada Cooperative Extension.
Jessica Candace, Public Information Officer, Nevada.
Sean Gephardt, Nevada Department of Agriculture.
Tim Scott with Signature Landscapes.
Ed Ryan, Valley Smith Valley Conservation District.
Daniel Anderson, Carson City Weed Coalition.
Dustin Booth, Carson City Health.
Brett Stenson, Mason Valley Mosquito.
Rob Hawley, Dayton Valley Conservation District.
Jim Schaefer, Washoe County Health.
Quinn Milford, Churchill County Mosquito Vector Noxious Weed.
Nancy Upham, Turtle County Mosquito Vector Noxious Weed Abatement.
Mike Hayes, Carson Valley Conservation District.
Jeff Begovich, Douglas County Weed Control Supervisor.
Okay, thank you. That's everybody that we have for right now in Sparks. Move over to Las Vegas. Scott, if you would like to start it.
Scott Chahopolis, Nevada Department of Agriculture. Jay Steele, Nevada Department of Agriculture.
Chris Bramley, Clark County Vector Control.
Rusty Carlson, Clark County Water Reclamation.
Jason Mayers, Nevada Pest Management Association.
Keith Pratt, Peace Pest Control.
Lonnie Tucker, Nevada Pest Management Association. Alan Paulson, Clark County School District.
Thank you. Thank you, Las Vegas. Elko?
Yeah, I'm Adam Henroyd with the Nevada Department of Wildlife, and I'm all alone.
Okay. Well, thank you. Glad to have you. So we've had this meeting today because we wanted to, like I was saying, kind of solicit some comment and talk to those that may be affected by this this regulation change that we've or amendment that we've kind of put forward to the legislature. Like I said, this is not an official public hearing or workshop. This is just really to talk to the various groups and go over the language that we've kind of proposed here and see how this may be of effect to you guys, and also give a better understanding to everybody else as why we've gone down this road or why we've submitted this language for change. Thank you. So, Lynn, do you want to give a quick overview, or do you want me to, or
however you want to do it?
Go ahead.
So I hope all of you have copies of the most recent edition of what we are proposing. You can see, if you do have the newest copy, green is new language or added language. Red is where we've stricken something, and in this case you can see it's renumbering just to make it correct since we added a section at the very beginning. If you look through the pages, most of the very beginning is pretty straightforward. I mean, all we did was add in a government agency license simply because the business license definition didn't fit, and so we decided to put something in that made language that did fit. If you go over, I think the next provision that really is of interest is section now 9, government applicators, license required. A couple of things there. First is we're changing, as you can see, 30 minutes to 60 minutes. We believe that's reasonable in terms of time. And we've also changed to what the seasonal hours are allowed in the statute, which is 1,039, so it'll cover all seasonal employees. Typically, other than that, they would become full-time employees according to state regulation. But we're going to, based on comment that we've already received, going to propose in section 9, 1A, it says indirect supervision is used in this section is defined as daily on-site contact. We're going to strike the words on-site. The reality of the situation is probably not feasible to do it, and quite frankly, it's probably not feasible for us to police it either. We wouldn't know whether you went there or not, so it doesn't make much sense. We just want to strike the words on-site. We do want you to have daily contact, at least with the crew, and assure that they're aware that they're supposed to be following the appropriate instructions, or wear appropriate gear or whatever, depending on what they're spraying on that given day, where they're spraying it, and all those kinds of things. But other than that, pretty straightforward. We just think we can strike the words on site. If you go through the rest of this, it's pretty straightforward. As far as this first sections, 1 through 13. If you have questions about that, we'd be happy to talk to you about any parts of that. And I'm just going to rapidly run through the rest of the provisions, just in case anybody has any questions. And we can do that. There are 2 or 3 reasons why we're actually involved with doing this. One is in statute, it says that a person in Chapter 555, it says a person is defined as a government agency, and then it goes on to say that a person who applies pesticides has to be licensed. It's in the past said for hire. We've had a lot of comment about that because obviously it's kind of a gray area. What is for hire? In the case of CWMAs, is it for hire? We don't think it's for hire. It was gray. We do have entities, Douglas County's had some for hire work done, and Jeff's already dealt with that by licensing, but there was a lot of push back and forth about what it meant, what the definition really would included. We decided we should clean that up. We're also concerned with safety issues, and amongst those issues, we've had this 20% gardener exemption, where it said if you're a gardener and you only do 20%, you don't have to, and we'll get to that language in a minute, you don't have to license. But we're seeing that being exploited by people who they'll break up crews, or they'll break up days, or they'll break up billings, and they really are doing far more work than 20%. We're also concerned a bit on the safety side with things like school districts, frankly, and golf courses that are out spraying chemicals and without proper training, without proper equipment, and the like. So we're trying to address the safety issues that we feel we're obligated to address within the statutes as they exist. That's why we really got involved in doing this and trying to correct some of it. So if you go back to page 4 then, where we were in pest control defined, to eliminate the gray area in regard to whether it's for hire or what is for hire or any of those things, we've stricken the words for hire. If that kind of work is being done, it's pest control, and under the law, pest control has to have somebody who's licensed overseeing that work. So you'll see that then in the next section as well, 555.277. Then when you drop to sub 2 under 555.277, what we've done is said if you're using toxicity class 3 or 4 pesticide toxicity categories as a gardener, you're going to have to be appropriately licensed, because those are the ones that are of concern. Go to the next page, we start talking about consultants and demonstration. We're trying to pick up people. We've got people who come in, some from out of state, some in-state, who go out, hold themselves out to be a consultant. They're not licensed, but they're actually selling pesticides, and they need to be licensed if they're going to sell pesticides. So that's where the consultant issue and research specialist, those kinds of things are being applied. Basically, language clarifications then through page 5. Again, clarifications primarily through all of page 6. Don't think any of those things have any significant impact. Through 7 the same way. Through 8, I don't think we have any other that is of significant impact. If you have questions about it,
Starting on 9 though.
on 9.
Yeah. Start, section, there's NRS 555.345. Just so everybody's aware, this sheriff's card is referring to something that we're looking to do at the Department of Agriculture. One of the things that we're doing department-wide. Good morning. Is we're trying to get all of our registration, and we're really trying to go paperless and online as much as we can. One of the things we're looking at, hopefully within the next year, is to have the registration period, the registration process for pest control operators be online, and you'll be able to schedule all your tests online, come into the office and take the tests on a tablet and some other things like that. So you'll get results immediately and things like that. It's going to really speed up a lot of things. But one of the things for primary principals, you're required to get a full background check, and part of that is getting fingerprinted. We used to make it where you had to come here, and it's still currently, you have to come here, do a fingerprint card, then take it to the sheriff's office, and the whole background check takes forever. We're trying to make that a much more easier process to go through, and so what we're going to be requiring is a sheriff's card in that licensing part of it, and they're much easier to obtain, a lot quicker to go through, and so that's all that's addressing there, and that's for the primary principals of a company. So I just wanted to point that out there, that is a significant change for us in terms of trying to make this whole process much less onerous on the people that are trying to get into it, and to make it easier on our end as well. So,
Is that only the principal, or is it 6?
Scott, is it only for the primary principal?
It'll be for all principals.
All principals, thank you for the clarification.
And I believe it's a sheriff's work card now.
Correct.
It's actually called a work card. I don't think the word sheriff should be there.
Okay. Work card, no sheriffs. Okay.
Can I ask a question on that real quick?
Please, Chris, go ahead. And I mean, this isn't a formal hearing or anything, but just so everybody knows who everybody is, if you could state your name, just so we know who to address back.
Chris Bramley, Clark County Vector Control. Just on that section that you're talking about there, all of my staff are fingerprinted and background checked when they hire on, and periodically throughout the year, the government agencies do that through their employees. So it seems redundant, since these positions are working in government situations, to have a work card, as you may say. As long as they pass all of those background checks through the government agencies, I really don't see the need for that for government applicators.
So Scott, with the way that you've got, thank you, Chris, and I'm going to try to address that. Scott, with the way that you've got things listed out here with the government licensing category, with each government entity that is licensing, they would still have to have a primary principal or a principal with that government entity, correct?
That would all be worked out in the code part of this.
Okay. So, and the code, what he's talking about, so this is NRS change. The code part would be NAC.
Yeah,
so,
if I might, Robert, just give a little background on how this is going to go forward, if it does go forward. Would that be okay?
yeah, I think that's fine. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, just so you guys know that this is the framework. And if this gets passed, the government agency part gets passed, there's going to be a whole slew of workshops and hearings that will actually further clarify and further define how government applicators will become licensed. So this is just giving us the authority to go forward and to make those administrative code changes and additions. So you're not going to see all the intricate details spelled out in the Nevada revised statute, simply because they will be further clarified in the administrative code.
Good point, Scott. Thank you. And so, in that, to get back to your question, Chris, I think, once we start setting things out in NAC, if the government entities already have, a background or something like that, as long as they can show any proof of that, that should suffice. That should be good enough. And so, we'll definitely, when we roundtable back on that, get that into there. And it looks like you got another question there.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say again, Chris Bremley, Clark County Vector Control. Sounds like we're putting the horse before the cart. Why didn't we do all of the workshops and all the meetings prior to the BDR, so that then it would have went smoothly and seamlessly and through the process, instead of doing the BDR, getting the classification, and then coming back and having workshops that may take, depending on some of the issues that need to be resolved, could take who knows how long. Why not just do all that first and then get something that both sides can agree on that works for all of the government agencies, and then move forward with to the legislature? That's probably one of my biggest questions, is you did business impact statements for pest control companies on some of your other changes, but yet I never saw this kind of workshop in the beginning that we could sit down and address all of the issues that the state would like to have covered, from safety to companies that are unlicensed to all of the issues that you're using as a reason for this change, and get all of that addressed first, because, like with my agency, we've been a member basically with you guys for 40 years, working with all of the changes, all of the training, all of the education components, trying to get state agencies, government agencies together. Why didn't we do that first?
Yeah. And I'll address that. This is Linda. The way the BDRs work for state agencies, we have to actually submit a request to the governor's office as an executive branch agency and say, we think this is an issue that needs to be addressed. Here's why we think it needs to be addressed. The governor's office then either says, yes, proceed with that, or no, I don't want to carry that. We only get 100 bills a session, and we don't want to use up one of our bills for your request to change things. In this case, the governor's office said, go ahead and submit the BDR. We think the safety issue needs to go to the legislature, and it ought to be addressed at the legislative level. Typically, in a BDR for NRS, for Nevada revised statute, you don't hold any hearings. It goes to the legislature. You don't have an opportunity to do this meeting at all. We voluntarily did this meeting. You don't do anything. It goes to the legislature. You have a hearing. You all would show up and testify at the hearing. That'd be the first you heard of it, other than seeing the BDR on the website, or if you were following it, and that'd be your first opportunity to have any input whatsoever, would be at the legislative hearing. We're trying not to do that. We're trying to do, Chris, exactly what you just suggested. On the other side of that, the reason we don't have the business impact statement and the workshops prior to is because without the authority, as Scott pointed out, we can't do any of those things anyway. So we don't know whether we're going to get the authority or not. So it would be kind of a cart before the horse the other way around. Without the authority, there's no reason to do the workshop. And we can't do the workshop until we have the authority. So we're after the authority to address this in code once we have the authority.
I understand what you're saying, but I mean, it just seems like if you came to the legislature with, hey, we've already addressed all of these issues, we've met with everybody, here's the language, everybody's approved. Sure seems like it would swim a lot easier that way than it's going to swim this way, because once you get your authority, I mean, I don't even know if you're going to get that far. You may, but it sure seems that once we get to the NAC part of it, there are going to be a ton of questions, a ton of changes, a ton of work that necessarily could have already been done and then submitted and went through smoothly. So I mean, I see it the other way. I've been in government a long time, like you have, and it sure seems that it's a lot easier if we all work together to get the language correct the first time, and we're not going to waste everybody's time down the road with change after change and new hearings and new meetings. And I mean, I'm just a proponent of working with you rather than working against you, trying to get changes made. So I mean, that's my comment. I just think that we should have done it the other way. We should have all sat down. You know, you can't tell me we can't come in and have a meeting with Scott and sit down and go, hey, listen, here's some of these changes that you're looking to change, here's what we've got. Everybody works together in our community, and then Scott can then propose the changes to you guys. I mean, we've always worked that way with the state on things like that. Now it just seems like we're not doing that. It seems kind of adversarial in a way, and, you know, I appreciate the statement that you made, but, you know, I would much rather work with you than to be on the other side of the fence trying to fight for changes, because frankly, there are things in here that don't make any sense for government applicators, okay? And I would have much rather hash them out locally with all of the agencies that are in my community than to turn around at the other end of this and hash it out. Just seems to me that we could have done this on a much friendlier basis, a much easier basis, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like it's going to go that way.
It's, again, Lynn Hetrick, you know, that's actually what you just suggested is the very intent of this meeting, is what we're trying to do is hash this language out to the point that we are going to walk in the door and say, we did have this meeting, we did agree with everybody and talk with everybody in advance, and here's the language we agreed to, and we're going to offer these amendments to fix this language from the beginning. But so that would be the first thing we do is sit down and say, we're going to offer these amendments, committee members, here's what we want to fix to make this suitable for all. That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Well, I hate to interrupt you, but it seems to me when we first sat in, we were informed that these changes weren't going to be made, and then you did make an on-site change to language. So if you're telling me that we're going to be able to sit here today and go painstakingly point by point through your changes and ask for clarifications, redactions, or eliminations or additions, well then I'm all for that. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes?
Yes.
And I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
That was the very point of the meeting, was we want your input. We're not trying to do this in an adversarial way. That's how we call it.
Input, again, Chris Brown, Clark County Vector Control. Input and actual changes could be different things. And when I walked in, and last week when I was here, that kind of was not what was transferred to me as what this meeting was about. It was that you guys have made these changes, you're submitting it, we're here to just talk about it. But if you're going to allow us to go through and you know, make some changes or agree to some things like that, then I appreciate that effort, and that would be perfect as to what I'm speaking about.
That's exactly the intent. We look forward to your suggestions and working out the language.
I appreciate that, Lynn. Thank you very much.
And I'm sorry if that was not explained well in the meeting that we had. So for those Mr. Bramley is referring to, we had a workshop and hearing last week on some other additions to Chapter 5x5 AC that dealt with spot treatments and consultants licenses and termiticides and things like that. And in that, I kind of gave a talk about, please, if you're available next week, please come to the meeting that we're having next week. That's the meeting today. To talk about some of the changes that we have. And I probably did not make it clear enough that this was more of a, hey, please come, we would like to get your suggestions, we want to make sure we get this right, we want to make sure that it's all, you know, something that works on both sides. And so I apologize if I didn't get that across in that way, Chris. And yes, most definitely we're here to talk about this, to take suggestions, to work on the language, to make sure we get it that works the best for everybody. So.
No apologies necessary. You know, that's what I appreciate, that you're going to allow us to discuss the issues. So there's no apologies necessary.
So are there other general questions, or I mean, we'll happily start wherever you want with the language and start through it and talk to you about what we got and see what we can do.
Do you have down any copies of the revision from last?
You want what I handed you when you walked through the door? That's the most current. What we have.
And this includes the stuff that was done over last week as well?
No, last week was completely separate. That's something, so this is a Nevada revised statute change. The stuff that was changed, that we went over a workshop and hearing last week was a Nevada administrative code, and that's separate from what this is. I can get you a copy of that language if you'd like it, but it's separate from this meeting altogether.
Okay, so other general comments, general questions, anything, or?
Charles, this is in what building pest control. Could somebody explain to me what you mean by general on page 1? General use pesticide. What does that mean? On the government application.
Scott, can you answer what general is as opposed to restricted or class 3 and 4?
Yeah, so a general use pesticide is a pesticide that is not federally restricted or is on the restricted use list for Nevada specific. So it's any pesticide that does not have the box at the top, or essentially strychnine in the state of Nevada would be a general use pesticide. If it has the box or it's strychnine, then it's a restricted use pesticide.
Are you saying that whether they use it general use, they should be covered? Is that what this is, or just a definition?
So for government applicators, if they're using general use pesticides, regardless of restricted, they will have to be licensed. So they have to be licensed if they're using general use pesticides, and they will also have to carry a certificate to use restricted use pesticides.
And I have another one with respect to Gardner. Is that different from a farmer?
Which section are you talking about?
On the same page, section 4-5.
Gardner.
Gardner, is that the same thing as a farmer?
No.
What is it?
So the question Charles has is a gardener the same as a farmer? No, a gardener by definition, the new definition, would be individuals who are doing landscape work at a residence, not in a commercial setting. It would be limited to residences.
Thank you.
Lonnie Tucker with Nevada Pest Management Association. On page 4, NRS 555277, C2, is this restricting the amount of product for pest control applications a gardener can make? Because it says on there, it says, page 4 at the bottom, number 2, it says the person does not advertise or solicit pest control or publicly hold himself or herself out as being in the business of pest control or applying pesticides at the cost of applying pesticides does not exceed 20% of the total received. So are we taking that out, or is that going to stay?
Scott Chahavlis, Nevada Department of Agriculture. What you see there is what is proposed to stay.
Okay. I think as a pest control operator and a member of the Pest Management Association, having an unlicensed gardener, landscaper, somebody like that applying pesticides, I would worry that, number one, are they using the right equipment? Number two, are they making the right application based on the label? And number three, do they have the proper training to make such an application? So that would be my question. I don't think I would want my gardener who's in charge of it. I could see if a gardener is using fertilizer or weed control, that probably has a license for that. But if he's using onslaught or dry on dust to control a bee situation or a insect infestation, that the person who hired them as a landscaper asked them to do that work, or even furthermore as a rodent control, using products such as contract and things like that in bait stations, what's the what's the liability on that landscaper, number one? Number two, how would we enforce that without knowing that application's been made? And what kind of paperwork would be involved?
So Scott Papas, Nevada Department of Agriculture. So this, again, you're looking at the authority. So you're looking at the NRS. Further in NAC, we further clarify that particular statement in the NACs, which you don't have in front of you. Okay. It is only for landscapes, so they cannot be doing industrial work. They can't do aquatic work. They can't do it. It's only limited to landscape applications. The 20% is, we know landscapers in general, okay, not looking at now the new gardener definition, but in general up to now, they're doing probably more than 20%. And that's a tough one for us to come in and look at. So what we're asking the legislature here is to eliminate those commercial landscapers. They're going to have to get a license, period, at the end, they're going to have to get a license. If they're doing commercial applications to landscapes in commercial divisions, golf courses, whether it's 20% or not, they're going to have to get a license if they do any pest control. That's what we're asking them to do. So this will further now limit it just to the home gardeners.
Gotcha.
The lawnmower mow and blow guys, and most likely they're not doing more than 20%. They're going to be using maybe pre-emergent weed control in a granular type state. They may be using some post-emergent to spritz a weed here or there in some home landscape. So again, they can't advertise, they can't solicit that they do that, but as an incidental role in their primarily lawn business, they can do some incidental pesticide applications to landscapes without getting a license. So I don't know if that
and if I can,
the definition or not.
I thought we were getting rid of that entire 20% last time, that whole language.
No, we asked them to leave it the way that it was. Right.
So Misty with the Nevada Pest Management Association said that she thought we were getting away from the whole 20%.
yeah, and let me comment quick on that. If you read the entire provisions of that section in sub 2, it says, who is a gardener using hand-powered equipment, devices, or contrivances to apply toxicity class 3 or 4. If they're applying anything more potent than that, they are to be licensed, and it has to be handheld application equipment only. So this isn't going to be a commercial operator doing a large spray, or a guy doing a golf course, or somebody like that. This is going to be somebody doing home yard work, and again, maybe it's pre-emergence, maybe it's kill a few weeds with Roundup around the driveway. It's not intended to be a commercial landscaper. They would be eliminated by this language.
We got a question from Jimmy Stevens.
Jimmy Stevenson, Jazz Pest Control. I also own landscape business, Jazz Landscape Services, and a member of the Nevada Association. And being in both sides of the business, pest control and landscape, landscapers have no business applying pesticides. They have no idea, no training, let alone the water contamination, the runoff issues and stuff they may have in a residential house. Landscapers are traditionally, they're treating people's ponds, they're treating plants. Pest control operators are limited to 3 feet from the house, but yet a landscaper that has no training at all can treat the whole yard. It's not right.
No, well, so Lynn, to answer your question there, they would still, landscapers, as long as they were doing residential, would still fall under the 20% and still be able to do, as Jimmy pointed out, the whole yard, not just 3 feet from the house or the structure or whatever else it is, as long as they were, residential and not commercial in the way that they go about doing their business. So, there would still be a bit of a gray area there, or where landscapers would be doing pest control work away from the structure, and as long as it was, they would still fall under that 20% for residential only. And so, I guess it's, that's a question. I see your hand up there in the back, and it'll be just a second. There's a number of people here in Sparks that have a couple questions too. So I guess, so Scott, is that something that we want to reevaluate and look at if we want to do away completely with the 20% exemption? Just for the concerns that Mr. Stevens pointed out there, or how would you like to move this discussion forward from there?
I think we got to go back and look at the definition of incidental.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if that is that a.
What? That's an NAC, right?
I think it's an NAC.
If you guys want to keep talking, I've got the NACs in front of me. I'll find that in the incidental definition here in a second.
Peace Pest Control and Board of Directors of the Pest Control Pest Management Association. I run into people who mow my lawn can't hardly speak English and can't read it. So if we allow them to apply pesticides, they can't even read the label. I think that they should not be allowed at all.
I'm not sure, this Lynn Hetrick, I'm not sure I don't agree with you. The problem I have, or I don't have, I think the problem is going to be at the legislative level. Obviously, the legislature in the past saw fit to pass a provision allowing 20% and using that arbitrary number for whatever reason. I don't know why. I don't know whether they would agree to take that out or not. We could take a run at it and see if they'll take it out. I think it may create a lot of angst at the legislative level, but we can certainly take a run at it. I know it's not going to make us mad. We're here for safety, and we want these people to be doing it right. And I certainly hear exactly what you're saying about reading the label and applying it accordingly, and having all the equipment, and knowing how to use it, and all the rest. However, the legislature in its infinite wisdom put 20% exemption in there, and I don't know if I'll take it out or not.
I have Jay going to get the full exemption list. This is just one of them, and we don't have the full NRSs in front of us, so some of this stuff ties back to existing regs that we don't have listed here. He's gone to get that.
Okay.
Jimmy Stevenson, Jazz Pest Control. Just like to add a few more comments here. Obviously, this 20% rule is being completely abused. And if you look at someone like myself that has a pest control company and a landscape company, if I get a call on the pest control side of something that's 3 feet out past the house that I don't have that license for, I can then send an untrained, unqualified employee that probably cannot even read the label to go and apply pesticides in someone's yard. Anywhere they want, on anything they want, no regulation.
Yeah, then we're going to have to take a run at it.
No nothing.
Okay, so I think we're going to have to take a look at the. Go ahead.
Look at other states and the Water Contamination Act and some other things that they've used to do away with this. Another thing is you can define the 20% a little bit further. You can define 20% in that day's work on that site. 20%, the way it's kind of defined in this is very, very broad. I think you could close that down a little bit if you need to leave the 20%. Just kind of thinking out loud.
How would
Robert, did you find the definition of incidental?
I have it here.
Yeah,
And so,
we don't have it in front of us.
Well, it's tied up in 259. I don't have a clear definition of incidental, but it is. It's right here. Hold on. The application of the pesticide comprises not more than 20% of the services performed pursuant to the contract.
Must be contract. So it says incidental to mean the application of a pesticide using hand-powered equipment to a lawn or an ornamental as part of the performance of a contract for the development or maintenance of a landscape, if the application does not compromise more than 20% of the service performed pursuant to the contract. and the person using the hand-powered equipment does not publicly hold himself or herself out as being in the business of applying pesticides or performing pest control. As far as I'm concerned, if you guys are happy, you guys and gals are happy, let's take a run at striking sub 2 under NRS 555277.
Wait. Oh, sub 2, yeah.
Number 2.
Yep.
Sean Gephardt, Nevada Department of Agriculture. I might be able to provide some insight on this. I came from the landscaping industry for several years before I came to work for the Department of Agriculture, and was a licensed pest control operator through the Department of Ag in landscaping. So let me provide you kind of a scenario of what happens here. We have a landscaping company that's able to have crew leaders that can spray a backpack with Roundup. But once a landscaping company becomes also a pest control company, then those crew leaders that are taking mow crews out can no longer apply just with a backpack any herbicides at all, unless they are a licensed operator. So that's what we found, and what my opinion was, is that here we have a landscaping company that it went on to get a pest control company like yourselves in the hopes to do it correctly, were actually then harmed and hindered through getting their license, because then they lost the opportunity for their crew leaders to go out and do a simple backpack spray with some Roundup. So here we have a case where we're trying to create a balance. We know that there are landscapers out there, I'm just going to refer to them as gardeners, that still need to apply maybe some ready-to-use Roundup herbicide in a small residential site. We cannot go out and hinder those guys to the point that it's going to prevent any sort of basic herbicide applications. But on the flip side, we can't hurt the landscaping companies that are going on to get a pest control license who are doing everything correctly. So we're trying to find this middle ground with the industrial, institutional landscaping companies that are the ones that are truly taking advantage of this by not getting a pest control license, that are still using this 20% in a larger context. So here we're doing a good job of trying to strike a balance here. And I am 100% in support of your Jazz Pest Control, and also having landscaping companies that are able to do both. And not all gardeners are not necessarily are completely ignorant to pesticide applications as well, so I don't agree with that.
Go ahead.
Lynn, Robert, Jim Schaefer, Washoe County Health. Can we go each section by section, so we have some kind of order to this? I know some of these things we probably should go pretty quickly through. Others, though, I'm sure there's going to be some discussions.
Since we're here, though, could we try to complete this section since we're here, rather than jumping away from it and coming back to it? I agree with you. I'd rather start at the beginning and go through it. If you had a question, and we asked for general questions, but we ended up here. What are you guys overall? Again, let me use guys as a general phrase, guys and gals. What are your thoughts in terms of paragraph 2? I think Sean makes a good point that we're trying to strike a balance, and we're open. I mean, this is a legislative decision. That's why we're taking it to them. We can take a run at it any way you want, but we need some consensus and a decision as to which way to go.
I have worked at residential when I was much younger as just a gardener, and I think if I was to tell one of my clients that I cannot apply some simple Roundup around his house, I don't think you're really benefiting that gardener very much either. I think a lot of residential clients are going to be a little frustrated with that as well. So, like I said, we're just trying to create a balance here. We know that the larger commercial outfits that are not licensed are the ones where you have maybe an upwards of 8 or 9 crew leaders that are putting out either a granular form of pre-emergence or fertilizer with pre-emergence, or applying to get away from this. How I used to try to get around of when I was in landscaping is that I would have a large area to cover, and I knew I couldn't use the motorized equipment, so I would get an upwards of like 9 or 10 guys with backpacks and then go through the whole property, just so I could avoid not getting licensed. Well, I went on to go get licensed, and I think, but then what happens is that you get dinged because you're not, then you can't send your crew leaders out with just a simple backpack without having them get their operator's license. And you make a valid point, a lot of your guys that are crew leaders can't pass the operator's exam. So this is where we're trying to create a balance here.
Go ahead.
Jimmy Stevenson, Jazz Pest Control. I would definitely agree there's got to be some sort of balance. It's got to work both ways. Residential clients do expect their landscapers to, so to speak, spot treat weeds, and possibly, aphids on plants and different things like that attack some plants here and there. But it doesn't work both ways on the pest control side. If we don't have the proper license, we can't touch any of that. And so why can a landscaper touch any of it with no license, no nothing, but the pest control guy can't? And like he's pointed out, for a landscape company to get pest control licensed, it hinders them or hurts them.
Mike Hayes, would it be helpful or harmful to differentiate between the use of herbicides and pesticides?
No, I think the point that was just made, this Lynn Hetrick that was just made, was the guy might spray for aphids and he might spray Roundup as well. So and it might be, pretty small. I don't know if we can get into that. I also think we have to be a little bit careful.
Pesticides without license.
I'm sorry?
The landscapers shouldn't be, they're a commercial operation, they shouldn't be applying without a license. If you're gonna do it to us, you gotta do it to everybody.
Well, Mike, you make a valid point, Sean Gephardt, Nevada Department of Agriculture. Since just gardeners need to apply herbicides at very small quantities with it, like I said, even ready to use products. They're already pre-mixed in the container you buy from Home Depot. That's a little bit more acceptable, whereas you could make a distinction in there, is that it's only for herbicides instead of insecticides.
Sean, the gardeners aren't only using herbicides. The point is that, they're using pesticides too, insecticides for aphids and things like that. So to split hairs on a gardener, if they're using an herbicide or an insecticide, we're going to have different classes of gardeners of herbicides and insecticides. I don't think that pans out either.
I just don't think that there's any ready-to-use insecticides. I think there's ready-to-use herbicides.
No, there are.
There are ready-to-use insecticides? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, good point.
Scott, it looks like Charles has his hand up there to make a comment.
Yeah, Charles, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Charles, I usually work in pest control. Why don't you ask those guys? They will have, they may surprise you with how to control all this stuff. It's like somebody going to Home Depot and buying stuff. So we will be going around and around and accomplishing nothing because they're not involved unless you talk to them. So why don't you talk to the guys to find out a solution, a middle ground. So I have a question on page 4, if I may.
Oh, no, we're going
to, let's hold it, let's try to finish this.
If it's relevant to this discussion.
Yeah, Charles, I'm happy to take your question if it's relevant to this paragraph 2, because what we'd like to do is try to clean this up and then actually start at the beginning and go through the language so everybody is comfortable.
So let me throw this out, Lynn.
Go ahead.
If you strike number 2 and we take gardeners completely out, that's going to throw it over to the Nevada Administrative Code for us to decide licensing for gardeners. So you know, in the code, we can then decide what kind of a license does a gardener need to have, and what would be the qualifications, what would be the testing requirements and the licensing requirements there.
I understand that. I guess my only comment again would be, I think to get the legislature to strike number 2, they're going to want, what Chris suggested, they're going to want us to say, so what's your solution then? We don't really want to throw this back to NAC, to the administrative code, and go through this again. What's the solution going to be? I'm afraid that's where they go, and I'm also feeling that we'd be better off to try to come up with language that is more acceptable here than we would be to try to fight it out in front of the legislature or do this again at NAC. Because I think in front of the legislature it get ugly.
You know, NAC 555-259 that Robert referenced to deal with also at that point.
That's correct. That would go away if we did it. So I guess the question then becomes, what's the compromise? I agree with Sean. I think there does need to be a compromise. I think that there does need to be some ability. I think this shot we took at this was trying to say, if it's an herbicide or a pesticide that you can buy at Home Depot, you can spray it. If it's anything else, you can't. That was what we were trying to get kind of to that level with this toxicity class 3-4. A homeowner could go buy that stuff and spray it. So why can't the gardener spray it? It seems to me that we're trying to go too far, and we're losing that compromise or some reality. The guy's getting paid to do work. If the homeowner went and bought it and then handed it to the guy and said, "Here, I'm paying you $20 an hour, spray it," is that licensable? I don't know, because the homeowner could have sprayed it himself. So it becomes difficult.
I think the decision was
Lonnie
made.
Tucker with the Nevada Pest Management Association. So in your last sentence, you said with the Home Depot, here's $20, apply this pesticide. Now is that landscaper or gardener now under hire? Now is he for hire? He was paid for a job, he's contracted through the money that he received, right?
Well, we're striking the for hire provisions, which means that whether you got paid for that job or not. So, but my point is simply that if you're paying somebody to apply it, so you buy it and take it home and you say to your grandson, "Here, I'll give you $10, spray the weeds." Does he have to be licensed? I mean, you're paying him, and somewhere there's got to be some level of compromise here. And that's what we're trying to get to.
Control. Why don't you, as I read this last line, if that a person does not advertise or solicit pest control or publicly hold himself or herself out as being in the business, because this is going to come back to government applicators, in the business of pest control or applying pesticides, and the cost of that application does not exceed, why not change that to just say that gardener must have an applicator certificate, and then define in the applicator certificate the requirements that person must hold. I see where you're trying to make sure that whoever does this work has some knowledge and safe application of pesticides. And pesticides can be herbicides, they can be anything.
Right.
So if that's the case, then why not require them to have some kind of applicator's certification? Doesn't mean he's licensed, okay? But it means he's followed your requirement for understanding the safe use of that product in that environment.
So in that instance, Scott, and I know we have a couple people that have some questions, if it was going to be a certification, which I'm on board with there too, would that be something that we do, like we've done in conjunction with Cooperative Extension or something like that, where we hold workshops to get certification for like RUP? If we do something like that for gardeners, where we would do workshops, they come in and we do a certification type of workshop.
What we would have to do is develop another Nevada revised statute that would give us the authority to issue such a certificate first. Because right now, it's either a restricted use certificate or a pest control license.
Okay.
That's doable here.
I'm Larky CPS. So if you guys are, this obviously seems like kind of a race to get into the California DPR model, which is unfortunate for Nevadans. However, that being aside, California has a qualified applicator's license and a qualified applicator's certificate. Primary of the company and its linked to business licenses, which I think is probably a smart idea. But the qualified applicator's license is held by one person at the company to direct work. Qualified applicator certificates are held by the applicators for the company. And that eliminates, it doesn't, you can, get ticky tape about what products you want under each of those qualifications, but that may be the answer for you guys. It's two different licenses, so a license that's held by the company and then a license that's held by every person that's applying. And, it's more bureaucracy, but that's the path, it seems like.
Okay.
Melody Hefner, University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, I just would like a little clarification. We're talking about, in this paragraph 2, of these gardeners, and they're applying toxicity class 3 and 4, so those are general use, correct? General use pesticides? But now we want the this gardener person to be a certified applicator, but the homeowner wouldn't have to be certified to apply these things. So where does it stop?
Right.
Robert?
Bud has.
Sensitive Mason Valley mosquito. Isn't this already been done by the label by Germany at general use? It's already deemed general use. Are we trying to redefine general use and categorize it?
Jay, did Scott step out for a second?
Yeah, he did.
I think the point is, though, that you're trying to protect the pest control companies that are going out there and they're doing above everything that you're asking them to do license-wise, and we're trying to protect them from these people that don't have to have any knowledge and are going out, and that's what's harming the industry. This goes back to my agency has never had a problem, never done anything that misapplied, never been investigated, has held their restricted use, have gone above and beyond certification, CEUs, training. I mean, we're leaders in this field, and we want to be protected from the guy, too, that's going out there and with Clean Water Act issues, over-applying because maybe he didn't read the label, he has no training, he has no understanding, and goes out and does this work versus a homeowner on his own private property that can run into Home Depot and buy what he needs. I think you should be protecting all of these people that are out there working hard every day to make sure they're meeting the requirements of FIFRA, the EPA, the state. You need to protect them from these people because I get the calls all the time. Oh, this guy come and applied something, he killed my yard. Well, who did that? Oh, it was my gardener. Well, the gardener needs to be held accountable. And so I think that's what we're trying to accomplish in this section, is how do you, the state, make sure that gardeners are qualified to go out and apply ready-to-use Roundup or ready-to-use home defense that the homeowner bought and gave them, or they went and bought themselves. Mm-hmm. We need to make sure that those people are in the same category as the rest of us in this room. They're knowledgeable, they've read the labels, they're trained in the application equipment, they understand Clean Water rules and that act. Because Clean Water Act is going to be regulating curb and gutter, these waters of the U.S. So in the big picture, everybody that applies a pesticide needs some kind of training up to the homeowner, because you can't regulate the homeowner, but you can regulate these people that are working in conjunction with landscaping companies and or pest control companies and or government agencies. So I think that's the direction you need to, and I forget who brought it up from California, But I think that that's, here we go, we're Californicating our rules, but in some situations it makes sense. You have a licensed applicator and you have a certified applicator. There's room in this for all of us, because government agencies should probably be certified applicators and not licensed, because we're not in this, even though you took out for hire, business licensing and all this other stuff, we're not doing that. Okay? And I know we're going to get back to that as we leave this section and come down that road. But I think it's clear that it's time now to have the certified applicator that's doing work that's not for hire or for business or commercial versus the licensing aspect of this. You want pest control people to be licensed in multiple categories. Right now, all of my guys and myself, we're certified in multiple areas. So the question becomes, are you telling me that a license makes me better if I'm certified when certification is much more? I mean, that's the point here, is that certification and licensing, those two words. And that's, I just don't think gardeners, I agree with J&S, Jimmy, and, gardeners are going out shortcutting them. Customers need to pay for the quality and the expertise of people that do the job right. And the customer needs to know that he goes out and hires ABC Pest or ABC Landscaping, and 9 guys come to his house to apply Roundup to kill some weeds. Well, maybe they didn't mix that right. How do we know? How does the homeowner know that those people are qualified to do that? And does the homeowner care? Hopefully he cares, and maybe we can educate them, through PSAs and things like that. But homeowners need to understand that they're the bigger part of this, misapplication of pesticides than the people that are licensed and trained and certified in this room.
Okay, so Lynn Hedrick, so I hear two issues I think we have to address, because I think we're getting close. One issue is, how far do we want to go down the road to be a bigger government agency and more like California? One, and two is, how are we going to protect the homeowner at the same time, or the people who are, or deal with the people who are out there exploiting this 20% rule to apply without proper training? And I'm wondering, I guess, and you guys, again, tell me, but what about we just strike 2? I mean, rather than get into creating more certificates and more things to test for and more, and just, go on forever, what if we just go in and ask to strike 2 and see what the legislature says?
Yeah, Charles, I did was working pest control. That's what I'm afraid of earlier. We can wrap this up here by looking at them as government entities, but we have to change the heading, because they use general pesticide, something you can buy from Home Depot, and then their requirement will be to have an applicator license. It's already here. So why don't we look at it that way, if you're not willing to talk to them to find a middle ground? So that's in line with what the previous speaker said. Why don't you look at it that way?
So Charles's comment is to look at the government applicator definition on the first page and align gardeners with that.
The requirement will be to obtain an applicator license. That you can define what that is. Training and all that jazz. So if they don't have the training, if they don't use the proper equipment, then they don't qualify for the rest of what they use. That's my suggestion.
Any
control. And then what he's saying, you know, because I kind of agree with what he's saying, and I think in the class of government or gardener, you know, you change it from license to certificate, and you put this line in here in 2 that says if a person, because we don't hold ourselves out to be in the business of pest control, okay? And if you take that and you add it into that section, then you could put us and gardeners in there together, that you're requiring us to have a government agency certificate, and that we're gonna be an applicator, and you're gonna define us as an applicator, and you're gonna define us on the rules and the training, and we talk about testing, you know, your testing is already in place for this. You're not gonna have to change tests for these people, because these tests are basically the same. They're sampling our knowledge of labeling, of handle, of use, of application. So you've already got the tests in place. But I think the big thing about government agencies, you know, we're not in the business of pest control. I mean, you may think we are, but I really don't think we're not holding ourselves out as that. We're doing maintenance work on our own facilities, our own structures, our own right of way. And I mean, you could still put us in a situation where we're government agency certified. Okay, as could you with the gardeners. You could make the gardeners gardener certified, and that they're following the rules, they're training, they're doing the CEUs, whether it's like the EPA wants to move it from 4 years to 3 years. They want to make things more stringent, which is great. But the word license is the biggest problem here for gardeners. They probably don't need a license, but they certainly should have a certificate that shows that they're proficient in that work that they're being asked to do, whether it's, again, general use, you know, something that their agency buys at Home Depot and gives them to go out to give the customers that are paying them. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, that makes sense, Chris. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off at the end there, Chris. That makes sense.
I'm good.
I mean, it's a misnomer, though, to say that government entities don't hold themselves out for hire, because we do have government entities in Nevada that do hold themselves out for hire, and that's where this becomes a bit of an issue. Lynn has got a little bit of maybe a rewording that he wanted to kind of discuss and throw that out there and see how that goes.
What if we added a gardener's certificate? As you point out, we have testing in place and the like. So we had a gardener's certificate, and under section 5, a new 5, gardener defined.
On page 1.
On page 1, we said a gardener means a person who typically owns or works for a business that, and then jump up to section 2, second line, provides pest control services with general use pesticides, 4A, and drop back down for routine lawn and garden care for homeowners.
How about just for commercial purposes?
Pardon me?
How about just for commercial purposes, because that's commercial business, landscaping. Any commercial applications need to be licensed.
Well, that would be a certificate, but, yeah.
Now, I think you're gonna run into another problem, and it's been a problem forever, is the handyman deal, you know? Because if you're gonna start regulating gardeners who aren't doing a lot of application, but doing application and saying you have to be licensed, let's change the name on the side of their truck to be a general handyman, and then they're out of the way, still can buy the same stuff, still can make the same applications. And we see that already. You know, it's a sticky wicket. I'm not sure how you guys are gonna get there, but, there's just gonna be a million ways around it.
Jim's got a question.
Yeah, Jim Schaefer Hill District, but if they did that and the homeowner complains about it, they'll be calling the ag department there, and that guy would be, he's subject to fine or have to be licensed.
I would give you that, but I would bring it back to the Department of Ag, actually, is that, we've been witness to what's been going on with the Department of Ag. How are you guys gonna enforce any of this?
That's a good point.
It's non-enforceable.
Oh, it's only based on somebody reporting to us.
Complaint driven.
Yeah, it's the only way it works. It's either that, or Chris has said it several times, somebody, pollutes water and some agency finds it and it comes back. Because there's literally no way. I mean, there must be 1,000 guys spraying pesticides today somewhere out here. There's no way we can police all of that. It's just impossible. So it's the only way it goes, is ultimately you get them because they violate and you catch them.
But if the gardener, if we keep it the way it has been proposed right now, if a gardener, even if he's exempt from getting a certificate or a license, uses a pesticide inappropriately, he's still subject to some enforcement under BIFRA if he's using it improperly. So, and that would be complaint driven. So in some ways, we'd be doing that same thing by keeping it currently as it stands.
But at least if Chris Bramley vector control, but at least if that person is certified through the state, it's much faster to remediate his violation than it would be through FIPRA or through federal.
Agreed.
You know, I think that's the point that we're trying to make is that, again, these pest control companies spend a lot of money, as do we, certifying and licensing our staff, and we're held accountable. So should the handyman. If you're worried about the handyman, then put that in there, gardener / handyman / you know, anybody but the homeowner that applies a pesticide needs to be held accountable, okay? And then if the homeowner is the issue, then let FIPRA go after the homeowner. You know, if the federal feds want to get into that. I mean, you know, the homeowner's going to do what the homeowner's going to do. And unfortunately, they're the black eye in the industry. But anybody that applies a pesticide, whether he be a pest control company, a government agent, a gardener, a farmer, if you're putting the pesticides out in the environment, you have to be held accountable some way, somehow. And if the state either requires them to have a certificate, whether it be restricted use, or whether it be an applicator certificate, or an applicator's license to a licensed pest control company, the state has quick action. Once that person, again, you don't have the people to enforce it, but I'm sure every pest control company in here would love to say, hey, listen, they're doing that over there, giving you the eyes, like I would. If I find out that somebody's, you know, doing that kind of work illegally and causing an issue for either me or a pest control company, I'm going to say something. Because it's my license or my certification or my livelihood eventually that is being looked at, as though I heard last week, oh, you government agencies are applying pesticides and we don't know what you're doing. Well, you know what my company, my agency's doing. Okay, so I want to make it known that it's public record. If John Q. Public wants to know what Clark County Vector Control does for licensing certification, they can come down and look at the records either through you or with us.
Well, I just want to remind you.
Holding us accountable. You've got to hold these people accountable.
In terms of just to go back to the gardener exemption here, it's protecting the pest control industry as a whole. These changes here are benefiting the pest control industry in terms
Not
of.
the way that one is written. You've already had testimony from some of these companies that say it doesn't.
It's moving in the right direction. Because as it stands now, there is still that 20% clause. If we don't change that, we're moving in the right direction.
Getting back to Lynn's, Jim Schaefer, Health District, getting back to Lynn's comments with the change, I think it's an appropriate change. The language, he's combining the language from 4 into 2 to go ahead and provide that license there. And if you wanted to, I think you should leave the routine lawn and garden care. You could go ahead and include, like what Bud was saying, including commercial use if they decide to do that as well too. So that would go ahead, at least, again, what's Chris is talking and others, is to go ahead and have that person licensed and certified.
I got a question. Instead of defining gardener and government agency, why don't you define homeowner? And then exempt everybody, exempt homeowner as a person that's making applications on their personal property, and anybody else falls into the other category.
Well, and again, Lynn Hendrick, going back, kind of combining those, I guess the question comes down to, do you want to provide a separate certificate? I changed the language a little bit, Jim, as we talked. Thank you, Robert. And if we take 5 and strike the word gardener defined and say a person who typically owns, getting to your handyman, a person who typically owns or works for a business that provides pest control services with general use pesticides for routine lawn and garden care for homeowners. And it would go on then to say must have a certificate, something like that. Now you can provide a certificate. They would have to have something to prove they know they can read the label and provide it. It covers your handyman. It's on a complaint basis. We're trying to get to these people. We strike the 20% and say any person who's going to do this for a homeowner is going to have at least a certificate.
So Melody Hefner, University of Nevada Cooperative Extension, just a little clarification. So now, right now we have certified applicators and licensed applicators. So what are you going to call these people now that have a certification for general use pesticides?
Well, the certified applicator refers to restricted use pesticide.
Right.
So that's a certified restricted use. And so this would be a certified general use applicator.
Okay.
Correct?
So why
It has to be.
can't the why can't the restricted use certificate cover both? Because you've taken the training that far. But if you only want to take the training this far for general use, that covers those other
You
guys.
guys would have to tell me, I don't.
Scott, I mean, you run the CEU program. You got any
Why would we need two?
any issues with, you know, making it more of a broader workshop or program that, you know, covers both, and then you apply for it and it's good for either or?
The restricted use certification is more of a federal program that's been driven down to the state level, and it has specific implications only to restricted use pesticides for the purchase, use, or supervising the use of that. That would take some major rewording and certainly outside the scope of what we have in front of us.
Right.
So if we just added a general, a certificate for general use pesticides, period. Basic training, and just called it that, so that the sentence would end that I gave you, a person who typically owns or works for a business that provides pest control services with general use pesticides for routine lawn and garden care for homeowners must have a general pesticide use certificate.
To cover both the lawn and the pest, right? I think the way you, Lynn, Chris, vector control, the way you stated it about 45 seconds ago when you read that was perfect in this room. We thought that the way the verbiage that you put in there was excellent. Now, I don't know if you've changed it with that statement that you just made, but the one you made a minute ago.
Chris, all I added to it was said they must have a general use pesticide certificate.
That, I agree, I think that's excellent.
Okay.
Cool. And my
All right.
comment.
And then we strike the 20%.
Yes.
Right.
So what we're saying is this goes out, and we're saying, and we're going to add, I'll add this must have, and we'll put that in there. We'll come back with this language cleaned up and get it out to all of you to review again later on. But can we say for drafting purposes, we satisfied this section for the moment?
Yep.
All right. Can we start over then at step 1 and begin through the language?
Sounds good.
All right, let's do that.
I like that because then that gets us out and we're not into overtime charging taxpayers extra money.
All right. So let's start on page 1, section 1. Government agency license. Questions, comments, suggestions?
Chris Bramley, Clark County Vector Control. I would like to change the word license to certificate. It's going to be the same, but I just don't agree that what JNS staff goes out and does and what we do is the same. So it may work out later on that we have the same kind of testing or whatever it means, but I just really think that the government agencies should have a certificate, because we're not in this like the back here on page 4, what it says, although there may be some government agencies that are doing it, like Lynn had mentioned, we're not. We don't do anything. We did many years ago, when we did the mosquito abatement, we did it for the entire valley, and then we charged the different agencies, Henderson, City of Las Vegas. We don't do that anymore. Now everything that my agency does is strictly related to our infrastructure only. Okay, so I just think that for government agencies that work like I do, they don't need a license, but they definitely need a certificate to do what you're asking.
Yeah, I guess my only, I understand, I think it's mostly semantics, but it's, I understand the point, I just hate to get into having more certificates and more licenses and more, we just seem to be having more and more names.
Well, I understand that, but I think it's clearly defined, there's a difference. Okay, and I think there's a clear difference in what government agencies provide to the government versus what private pest control companies provide. You know, it kind of goes back to the sheriff's card. I don't go into different houses. Okay, I'm not going into 15 different, 20 different houses a day. You know, I'm basically in government offices, and so our background checks provide the fingerprinting and to make sure that the people are qualified to be hired by the county. Okay, but licensing, and you know, I understand that a lot of this is driven monetarily. So it doesn't really matter, as you say, semantics. You're still going to charge me what you're going to charge me, and hopefully we'll have some discussion with that. But I just think that government agencies should be certified or have a certificate to do the work they do, which still encompasses the training, the knowledge, the ability to do the work, but not as a licensed applicator, because I don't go out, I don't hold my, we don't, you know, say, hey, North Las Vegas will come do work for you, or City of Henderson, okay? I mean, you can still get to where you want to go, but I just think government agencies that don't do anything other than what they do for the agency, they're not generating any funds by going out like Tri-County weed control. You know, Tri-County comes all the way down to Clark County to spray right away for NDOT. If they're doing that, then yeah, maybe you want them to be licensed. I don't know. That's probably a discussion for Tri-County and Brandon, all right? But for what Clark County does, we don't do that. We don't go up to northern Nevada and spray anything. We don't treat any facilities for anybody but our own. So I just think that, again, if a government agency is certified, that any government entity issued a certificate by the department engaging in pest control. You still require us to have the same knowledge, the same, you know, background, the same testing, the same safe. Like I said, I can produce, you know, I've got right here from 1984 when we helped write the test for people. Okay,
right.
I've got the original document. We've been involved. We're going to make sure that we meet what the statement was that was made last week, that the public seems to think that we're just government employees that don't know squat. That's not true.
Yeah. So, Chris, let me go this way. The one thing it does do is differentiate. I don't have a problem with it. We could call it a government agency certificate. I guess the only, where I would end up then is an applicator license defined as an individual holding a current pest control license issued by the department. That would still apply to the principal or the governmental agency. So some person's going to have an applicator's license. Yes?
And again, when we get to that one, I'm gonna argue that one too. I mean, I understand where you're going. You want, notably myself, see, I don't apply any pesticides. I'm the supervisor. Okay, I don't do any of that work. I run the department, the day-to-day operations of vector control for Clark County. I set up work, I send the crews out, we oversee everything related to vector control in the county, but I don't do any of that actual applications. Okay? My staff does that work. And so in having them being government agency applicators, because that's what they are, okay, and that they hold the certificate and the training, that's what they're going to do. So when it comes to what you're going to require me to do, I want to discuss that as well. But for my staff, okay, I think that they should be certified, government agency certificate for them, and they're government applicators. And in here it says, when we jump to 2, defines means a person who is an employee and provides pest control services with general use or restricted use for a city, county, government, or agency or entity and operates only within their respective jurisdiction should not be it should be just an applicator and have an applicator certificate for the staff that work for me. Now, when you come to me, then I guess we'll have that discussion.
Okay.
Let me make a quick comment. Another reason that we went separation is because if we're grouped in the same classes for hire, I know you're eliminating that, but you would put us in the same class, it's gonna shear our insurance rates through the roof, because now you've opened the door to a whole bunch more responsibilities and burdens. That could happen, even though we don't do that in our practices. But the insurance company would say, but you can, so we want insurance for that. We're gonna shoot our rates.
But again, you gotta remember, we're self-insured.
Yeah,
Okay, so when we get to insurance, there'll be another conversation. But when it comes to insurance, my county is self-insured.
Governmental agencies generally all are self-insured within the state liability system. So it shouldn't be an issue, and I think dropping the for hire part off might actually help as well, because I think they're going to be more concerned about the guy who's out doing this for hire who really doesn't know what he's doing. Chris, to kind of address your question, to try to make this work for everybody, what we've tried to do is say, look, within a county, you're going to have one license. Want to call it a government certificate? I don't care. You're going to have one certificate. Somebody under that certificate has to have a applicator's license, full training applicator's license. The rest of the seasonals, and let me just mention our concern is for somebody like NDOT. They run during the summertime, huge number of crews that are out spraying roadsides and all the rest. They can't have an applicator, a licensed applicator who's a seasonal on every single crew. It's not going to happen. And they're not going to get it done. So what we've tried to do with this language is say, look, one person who's in charge has to be licensed, and they have to be available to get to whomever's applying stuff within that county within 60 minutes. Now, we can't police 60 minutes, but within reason, you got to be able to get to somebody and be able to see if they're making a mistake, they did something wrong, they had a spill or something. We want someone who knows what they're doing to be able to get there. The way you're going, I don't disagree with it, but now what you're saying is every single crew is going to have a licensed applicator on it. That's going to cost a lot of people a lot of money and take a lot of time, and a lot of these crews are seasonal. We're trying to give the room to go the other way. You don't have to be licensed, but you're going to have one guy under you who's in charge.
And I understand that, Lynn, and that's the point I'm trying to make, is that, years ago I thought we needed to make this change with government agencies. So I want my people that work under me, I want them certified applicators. I want to prove to the public, to the people that work for the employees of our agency, that my guys are licensed or actually certified applicators. Okay, and we don't have a problem with that. When we talk about money and issues, that's going to be another conversation, because again, in our HR contracts, our union contracts, the government agency may pay for that. So when we get to that, we'll discuss that. But I want my staff to be certified. When they're out there, I want to make sure that my staff are the best trained applicators in the industry, okay? And so I don't have a problem with them having some kind of certification that says they're certified in making applications of pesticides. When it comes to me, then we'll have that discussion. Where you want me to be in that level, we also have other agencies within our government structure that do this work. So then the question becomes, do you want one person with the county that then oversees the airport system, oversees the parks and rec systems, oversees public works? Or are you going to have 3 people in there that do that work? So, we got water rec that also does it as well. So I just would rather make sure that my staff, anybody that works for me, is certified in the proper use of restricted use, which we do use at times, and general use. I want those people to be the best. And the only way they're gonna be the best is if they hold some kind of certification. I don't want them to hold a license, but I would certainly love to see them certified like we currently are. And again, you can rub the edges of the way we're certified, but, you know, we hold and have always held that that's part of your job description, that you must have a Nevada restricted use certificate with categories.
Chris, Chris,
Go ahead.
a question for you. And maybe this is a semantic type of thing. What do you see the difference between a certification and a license?
Isn't that why we're
Well,
here?
again, I see a license as a person that's hired. Again, that verbiage says right there, a person that holds himself out, okay, in the business of doing the work that the companies in here do. We don't do, we're technically different. Okay, and again, like Lynn said, if it's semantics, we're different. We're not the same. And I think that that should be in your regs, that there is the licensed pest control professional and there's the certified government applicator. And in their training, we may have the reciprocal training, which again, you can see from our records, we go above and beyond what you ask for.
So,
you ask for, you know what I mean? So
I get what you're going with, Chris. My question is, where do you see the difference then? I understand Clark County does not hold themselves out for hire. You've made that point, and I get it. My question is, for all the other government entities that do hold themselves out for hire, where do they fall in your scheme there then?
In for hire. Okay, and that's why I want to argue about removing the words for hire, because Tri-County is the one that I know. I'm sure there are other agencies up in the north that move out of their jurisdictions.
Well, it's not even jurisdictions. It's not even jurisdictions, but they do. We have government entities, just to make it clear out there, we have government entities that do government work, like Clark County does. They cover their grounds and everything else, and they do work for hire at the same time. So it's not jurisdictions or anything else. Well, I guess it would be, you're calling it a jurisdiction because you're calling, you don't go to the north or something like that, and I get that. But, within their jurisdiction, they do work on county ground, let's say, or they do work here and there, and they also provide a service to homeowners or something else where they do work for hire. And so then that becomes a twofold category for government entities on...
Well, right, then that entity, you would require them to have a license.
On which part of it?
If they're doing work on private property, isn't that against the NRS? Because in my government agency and public works, I can't do any work on private property per NRS.
It's for hire, no limitation. It's an enforcement issue.
So if those agencies in the north or in the central part of the state are doing work other than what like I do as a public agency, and they're getting paid on the side for that work, then they would be a licensed company, a commercial entity, making money that they're getting taxed on the side additionally to their salary from the government agency. And in effect, they're double dipping and making money on the side for doing something else. So to me, they should be licensed because they're doing more than just what a government applicator would do. And I'm not begrudging them for doing that. If that's, I'm not going to begrudge any government agency for doing what they're doing because they've been doing it for a long time. Okay, but for us, because we did it when we did all of our mosquito abatement in the beginning of this program many years ago, we charged the other agencies and they paid us. Okay, but we don't do that anymore. We're strictly limited to what we do to, one, protect the public from mosquito abatement work, and that work we do, we only do in our structure. If it's on private property, the health department does it, or guides them to do it. And again, so we only do, so I can see in the government agency listing two different sections. One that holds themselves out for hire and ones that don't. You may still charge us the same, you may still require us to have the same knowledge, but we're not doing the same work.
It's Lynn Hetrick again for the record. I just think we're creating categories that we don't. I understand your difference, but to me, the way we've done this wording, if I change section 1 to government agency certificate, Section 2 says government agency or government applicator. It doesn't say anything about a certificate or a license or anything else. It says if you're under a government agency, you're a government agency applicator. You're covered. You're done. I don't, if you choose, Chris, to make your people all have licenses, we'll happily do the license testing and collect the fee and go on down the road. That's your choice. But we've got a lot of these counties right now, frankly, that we'd love to have them get involved with pest control and weed control and a whole lot of things. If we add more cost to them and tell them they got a license, everybody, it'll never happen. So we're trying to make this as inoffensive and least burdensome as we possibly can, and still get to the safety issues that we need to. And I feel like we're arguing over semantics.
So am I hearing you? Are you telling me that in my agency, the only person that has to be licensed or certified or whatever is myself?
One
as
person.
the leader of the group?
No, anybody that would be full-time.
One full-time person within your county or your whoever's, however they want a license. If your county says you got to go out and every single individual group has to get their own license, that's the way it works. If your county says, oh, we'll take over all responsibility, that's the way it works.
You're saying that. My agency says that anybody within my section of vector control, be it the supervisor or the vector control officers, have to have a Nevada restricted use certificate. That's what my job classification states for us to have. Is that acceptable for you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So therefore, what changes am I looking at?
One
That's
person.
where I'm kind of confused here. Is my government agency requires all of us to have the Nevada restricted use certificate along with categories in right-of-way, public health, institutional, structural, mosquito, aquatic. We hold all of those.
Yep.
So therefore, what changes are you looking at me to make for my group?
And this is the issue that you really are hitting the nail right on the head right there when you said what changes you required me to make. The issue here is we're dealing with 17 counties. We're dealing with school districts, and we're dealing with all kinds of things, CWMAs, and you name it. We're dealing with every entity, not just you. And so what we're trying to do here is write something that everybody can live with. If you choose to have a higher standard, you can have as high standard as you want to. We don't care. Go higher. We're all for it. It's better safety. We want you to do all of that you want. We've got some people out there who have nobody who is licensed, who is scattered.
Right there. Okay, then let me stop you right there, Lynn. Since we already have something in place, what changes does my agency have to make? If I already have in place.
Okay. Right. The answer to that is there'd be one government agency certificate, using your language for that, and one person who you define to us is responsible as a licensed applicator for your agency. That's it. That's what we're asking you for.
And the business license?
No business license. We took that out. I have government agency. It's out.
To streamline it, since restricted use, Bud Stenson, Mace Valley Mosquito. To streamline it, since a restricted use certificate is like the ultimate training, because we're using restricted use, why wouldn't that test cover the licensing test as well? And then only people licensing.
I think
why do we need two?
I think it went through what Scott said. It's a different test. It's a federal requirement. But we're only asking one person to do this.
Wait, Glenn, I want to make sure we're clear though. When we're say, Scott, I'd like your input on this. When we say it's only one person, it's not the one person. Based off of page 2, if you look here in section 9, anybody that would be full-time employed would be required to get a certificate or this license, or what we're calling a certificate, on that crew. So if you've got anybody that is full-time, they would be required to either get, if we're calling it a certificate, we're calling it a certificate. If we're calling it a license, we're calling it a license, whatever you want to call it. But it wouldn't just be one person. It would be anybody who was, is that the way that you read it? Because so Chris, how many full-time employees do you have, just for instance?
right now, my staffing level is 4. I'm hiring the 3rd, and the 4th will be hired later. So
Okay.
there are 4 people that go out and do the work from mosquito abatement, right-of-way, pest control for our facilities, and then there's myself. So we're 5. We're 4 field workers, and I hate to use that word, but there are 4 people that work out in the field, and there's myself that runs the agency.
Alan Paulson, Clark County School District.
Go ahead, Alan.
I agree with what Chris is saying, because quite frankly, we've got over 40 certified applicators that do basically general type of application. And so then to automatically say that you have to go through a licensing type of thing, you're going to affect, it's going to change job descriptions. It changes a lot of things that we have to do to accommodate any of these changes like that. And we've gone what I believe is above and beyond to try to satisfy the requirements of the Department of Ag in the past, and in getting all these people certified so that we're safe for our school children and our customers out in the schools.
And that's what I'm trying to say, like Alan says, that we have job descriptions that define the work and the requirements for that work. And we have union contracts also in place that make for who gets licensing paid for. So in this change, that's why I talked about in the beginning that if we had a meeting prior to, we could have brought this to the state's attention, that the changes that you're asking are going to be drastic to some of these agencies. And like, I've worked with Alan forever. We share training. You know, they've come to my facility to do training, as has NDOT and the city. I mean, we go above and beyond all the time what the state asks, and I'm sorry that some of the agencies don't. You know, that's ridiculous on their part because of the liability that they have. They should be doing this, and they should have been doing it all along. And I know it was referenced to me last week that some of these agencies have dropped that. And any agency that dropped it, you guys should have been on them and said, no, you can't. You know, why are you dropping this? And maybe, I don't know if you can, say they can't or whatever, and that's where you're trying to get to now. But like Alan said, we go above and beyond. And to ask us to now, and unless it's your inclination to convert our certifications, licensing at no charge, and then we can continue on, that's fine. But, you know, there's going to be a drastic effect more to Alan's group than to mine, because there's only 3 of us and myself, but I don't know about NDOT and the other government agencies. You know, you're going to have a drastic impact. And I met with our attorneys back prior to last week's meeting, and they gave me a whole bunch of stuff they feel doesn't pertain to us, okay, as being a government agency, and then have also directed me to then move to our legislative group to try and sit down and make the appropriate changes. But I know I'm speaking too much. Scott had a point, and I'd like to hear what Scott has to say.
Scott Chahofflis, Department of Agriculture in Las Vegas, and I hate being a historian, but you know, I'm gonna go back a little bit on what's happened up to this point, and then I've got a couple of suggestions that maybe we can throw out there, listening to what everybody said. Government agencies wanted something to present to show that their individuals were semi-competent in the use of pesticides to the public. The Department of Agriculture did not have a program for them. Tom Smigel, God rest his soul, said, well, let's use the certification program. And I had some heartache with that, because the certification for restricted use pesticides has one particular meaning, and that is the meaning that you can purchase and use a restricted use pesticide. It means nothing about an applicator's license. He goes back and says, well, that's all that we have to offer them, so let's go ahead and use it. That's what's caused this whole issue at this point in time. Government agencies, school districts, public entities have been using the restricted use certificate essentially as a license for their employees. That's what we're trying to get away from, is make the restricted use certificate, because it has a federal meaning, exactly what it is, a restricted use certificate. If you need to use a restricted use pesticide, then you need to get the certificate to do that. Some of the, listening to what's been going on, and I'm gonna go back to page 1 here, and I'm gonna refer back to a couple of pages, and Lynn, just kind of hold in here with me. In section 1, if license is a real issue there, change it to certificate. Government agency certificate defined, government applicator certificate defined. And then back on page 5, where it says NRS 555-280, we can simply insert applicator license or government applicator certification required to engage in pest control. Then under where, at the very end, where it says, within this state at any time without an applicator license, insert or government agency certification or certificate issued by the director. And then weave that in throughout those regulations where appropriate. And that might further clarify when we go into what is required, because again, this is going to be inserted at the very end of the NRSs, so these are the things that come very first for everybody that's in there. Then it would become clear as to what we're requiring when it comes to a government agency certificate, what is going to be required of a government agency applicator in sections 9 and 10, 11, 12, and 13. Just a thought there to try to get past the semantics of license and certificate. And then I think because the law says a person is required to do that, I think by stating that and then defining what those certificates are, it may become a little bit clearer as to what we're trying to do.
And I would agree with that, Scott, and I like where you're going, and we'll definitely get some more comment here in a second. Would that then, because you're trying to separate restricted use pesticide certificate from what a government agency certificate would be, we would then develop a certificate exam, let's say course or something else for government entity certificate to separate them completely. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I know there's probably a number of people who have questions, so.
Yep, that's good.
Chris, did you have questions as well?
Yeah, no, I want the other government agencies that are here to give them, I don't want to monopolize it because I'm sure they're all different than I am, and I would love to hear what they have to say.
Jeff Begovich, Douglas County.
I'm Jeff Begovich, Douglas County Weed Control Supervisor. So Chris, this will blow your mind, but so this is how we operate. I'm the supervisor for the Weed Control Department, and I'm licensed through the Department of Ag as a primary principal. So then my full-time employees, which there's only 2 of them, they're both licensed as applicators. Now, that gives us 3 licensed folks out there to supervise the seasonal staff that we kind of ramp up with in the weed season, which is May through September. So that's how we operate that, and the reason we are for hire is to recover costs on implicating NRS 555. So we had to figure out a way to bring some income in so our county wasn't fully supplementing noxious weed laws. So, and it's not like a little department with a few guys. You know, we do a lot of work for hire to help us recover the cost of, you know, implementing NRS 555.
It says in your certificate not for hire. Why?
This is the first time this not for hire came up is right now.
And I agree that if you're trying to recover costs or recoup costs, or then, you know, that's the issue that you need to go, but we don't have to do that.
Right.
You know, I don't have to recoup any costs. my budget is defined every year for the work that we do.
Right, and that's a tax-based situation, I'm sure, where this isn't. So that's why our county does the way we do. And I haven't had any problem operating like that. I mean, we've been coming along with this all along.
How long have you been under this model?
This last year is when we came in.
Okay, so what made you make that change? Other than, did you have some kind of an issue with your staff, or an application that went awry, or was there something that happened that then forced you to make that change?
I don't think anything forced us to. We just generally stay ahead of the curve on that. So prior to that, we had a restricted use certification for myself and,
So how did the change make your staff better?
Well, it
Because
certainly.
in the restricted use model, they should be just as well trained as in the licensing model.
No, the testing is a lot different for the license, and I can tell you it's a lot more intense than just what you have to take from it.
I disagree with that. I've been doing it probably as long as you have, and I can tell you from all of the testing and the stuff that I've done is that in this avenue that we go, the questions are basically the same. You don't make any difference.
Chris, Sean Gephardt, Nevada Department of Ag. I've been a licensed pest control operator before I came to work for the Department of Ag, primary principal.
So was I.
And I was a certified RUP, certified person. The test is exponentially harder.
Well, again, I don't see how it can be harder because you're doing basically the same thing. Drift is drift, mixing is mixing, PPE is PPE, knowing when and how to use products are the same. The knowledge is all the same. Like I said, I've been doing this as long as you have. I was a licensed applicator before I came to the county. I kept my licensed application for many years in the county before I finally gave it up. I've done the training. I've been there with CWMAs. I've been there up and down the genre of what we do, and it's basically the same education. So again, licensing for government applicators that aren't doing anything other than what we're doing should be an applicator certificate. People that are doing it, like the gentleman said, that are doing it for hire to try and raise money for some other awareness, or maybe have had some issue with applications and got in trouble for and felt they needed to have a licensing to correct those issues, I don't have a problem with that. But for what my agency has done for 40 years, not once have we had a problem. We've stayed by this model. This gentleman trained me in the business, and I've been here all along with the state from day one, from Tom Smigel to Robert. And I'm telling you right now, the education and the knowledge that we have will not change if we are licensed versus where we are right now.
Okay. And I think, that's a discussion for another time. It doesn't matter whether it's harder or not harder in regard to what we're trying to get here. So we need to continue to work on what we have here and try to get this language done. We're going to be here a long time. A couple of quick comments in regard to your comment about the business license. In section 9, sub 2 should be stricken. So if you'll look at section 9, sub 2, we just looked at that. That should be stricken. We think the area of whether or not a full-time applicator has to be, a government applicator has to be licensed, and there's more than one, is gray. And the reason I say that to you is, and I think it's a difference in the way we read this, but if you read section 9, sub 1, it says, a person who's a government applicator shall not use a pesticide within this state at any time without a, change the word to certificate, issued by the director, except a person using pesticide under indirect supervision, and then it should say of a certified government applicator, and it's a period. That means there needs to be one, in my opinion, the way this language reads, one certified government applicator. The rest of this, indirect supervision, just defines who the applicators are, and then does seasonal. it tells you that you have to have, or what indirect supervision, sub A says indirect supervision. It defines what it is, what you have to have in place to call it indirect supervision. And then the second A, which should be a B, is simply saying that seasonals are applicators under indirect supervision. I think it's
And I have
important.
no problem with that, because I don't have any of that class. You know, I don't have any seasonals, okay, we don't, so, yeah, I don't have.
Yeah, you don't have to deal with it then, Chris.
Right.
You're done with it.
Exactly. So, however you need to make that work for you, see, that's the point I'm trying to say, is it's not one size, you know what I mean, we're all different, all of the government agencies are different. So, some agencies may need something for their seasonals and their indirect, and some people need something for their bill backs and the extra money that they're making on the side. We're all different.
Exactly. And that's, I mean, that's exactly where we're going. We agree with you. And this covers people like MDOT. And that's one of the issues that we have to deal with. It covers you.
Because it covers us, it covers Tricia as well too.
Yeah, it covers all these guys. So that, and you don't have to comply with it if you have full-time employees. You're done. You can go your own way.
So I think the one issue that is brought up here in this, though, is we're talking about a person who works for government. So we're saying a government entity needs one license per applicator, okay? So in the case of, let's say, Douglas County, and this would apply for Clark County or any other county. So Douglas County has weed control that is done by them, but then they also have a vector portion to it that goes out and does weed abatement, or not weed abatement, but mosquito abatement. And then they've got, let's say, you know, somebody that's doing water or something like that, and they've got a conservation district underneath that government entity as well. So my question then falls under, does that, the government entity would be the county, correct? If we're all with that, that's the county. Do all of those smaller pieces, you know, that make up the whole for the county on everybody that's doing weed work fall under that one license? Because then, and correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, we have an issue where that one applicator has to be certified or licensed in all those various categories. Mm-hmm. And so we would have to have one person that would be good at, knows everything about vector, you know, for mosquito control, weed control. If it was a fungicide in water canals or anything else like that, that one, we're leveling all of those categories on one person for everybody else to operate under. So then, would we be getting a licensed person in each one of those, let's call them departments, to be an operator license underneath that, or how do we see that working? Because I can't imagine that a county entity would have one person that is licensed in every single one of those categories, so then everybody else under that regime fits. And so that's my biggest concern for all of this, is we have that one person. You're never going to get one person that's good in all of those categories. And so you're almost going to have one person that's licensed in each department to then have everybody else underneath them in that department fall under that license. And Scott, if I'm wrong in the way that this is written, please let me know. But that's the way that I see it, and I want to make it work for everybody and for every county. Because quite frankly, we don't want, you know, a conservation district to have to license completely out. They are part of that county. And so we want to see how does that work, and how do we make that work, Scott? You know, if we're going to have a licensed person in that county.
The first thing is, if you stricken number 2.
Which 2?
Under section 9.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're now only limiting it to the individuals, from what I can see there.
And that's how my system is set up. All of my staff, we all have restricted use, and then under that, we have the categories defined in the areas that we work. Whether it be in our black fly program for aquatic insects, whether it is in our mosquito abatement, our right-of-way, our institutional, our structural, public health, we've done the certification in those areas. And that's what I think, Robert, you're speaking of, is that in my program, we have a diverse program. And all of our staff is responsible for all of those topics. So what we've done is required them to have the restricted use certification, and then under that, my license will say that I'm in mosquito, public health, da-da-da-da-da-da, and that's how we like it listed for us. That way, each one of my guys can go out and do something in any one of the particular fields that we're responsible for.
Right.
So what I was saying is that since number 2 has been eliminated, we pretty much are only going to require the individuals to get a government applicator certificate. So if that's the case, then section 1 could be eliminated, and we go right into section number 2. And then it becomes an individual person certificate. If we change 280 to allow for the certificate to be issued, then it would not be hinged upon a government entity in specific, but it would require the onus on the individuals to make sure that they get their certificate in the appropriate categories for that particular entity, very much like what we have in the restricted use certificate right now.
And let me jump in there, Lynn Hetrick again. And I see that two ways. I see where you're going, Scott, but I think you still issue a government agency certificate because of the insurance ramifications and because of the multiple issues of CWMAs and maybe mosquito control and then a weed abatement and maybe a parks and schools and who knows what. And when I said one person, jumping over to back to section 9, if a county had one guy who licensed it or one gal who licensed in all of them, good for them, and that's the overseer, good for them. But nothing prohibits them from having more licensed people. It simply says you have to have a licensed person. So it could be that you've got one license for mosquito control and you've got another one for parks and rec or urban or whatever it is. Yeah, it's not a limitation, it's a requirement. There has to be at least one. That's what we're saying here. And I still think you want to keep the government entity involved, even if you give them the government applicator certificate, again, for a lot of reasons, so we can cover as many entities as we can. Frankly, one of the issues I think we have to address here, and we're going to have to add a section, is something like a CWMA in a county. That's technically not a governmental agency. Yet we want to cover them under the same blanket if we can. These are people who are doing nonprofit, going together, trying to do work coincidentally to benefit everybody, and nobody else is going to do it in some of those counties. We don't want to eliminate them. We don't want to make it so expensive they can't do it. We're trying to cover everybody, and that's whenever you try to do all things for all people, and Chris said it too, you're going to write something that's not necessarily very pretty, but it's, you know, it's what we're trying to accomplish here. So we don't put anybody out of business or put them to where they can't do the work that needs to get done. Go ahead.
So I just got a quick question. If we step away for a second, if you're a landscape company and if you're doing pest control work for hire, let's not say structural, let's just limit it to a herbicide application. With the elimination that you just did in the other section, right now you're going to have a primary principal, right, because you're doing an application for hire. You're going to have an applicator, licensed applicator, right? And then every crew that goes out to make a Roundup application, you're going to have one certificate there, right? So on a landscape company, you'll have to have 3, right?
No.
Because if you eliminate the Gardner thing, you will.
Scott?
Yes.
Did you hear that question?
I didn't. I'm sorry.
Matt, would you mind repeating that?
So if you're a landscape company, Scott, you have to, for doing application work for hire, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, so if you're doing application work for hire, you need to have a primary principal to do the application work. You need to have a licensed applicator, right? And then every crew leader that goes out, you have to have a guy on each crew with their backpack full of Roundup with a certificate.
No. So if we eliminate the Gardner provision, you will fall under the regular urban and structural, limited landscape, and weed categories, and every individual that's out there applying pesticides will have to have a license unless they are immediately which is shoulder to shoulder, being supervised.
No, that's a landscape company, not a government company. So,
But I don't,
Okay, that's you're talking about a gardener landscaper. That's what it is.
so you're gonna have to have, anybody spraying anything is gonna have to have a license, is that correct?
That
No,
is correct. If it's going to be in the landscape, you're talking landscape, not
Right,
government.
I'm talking landscape right now, yeah.
In
we gotta flip
a
there.
commercial setting.
In a commercial setting.
In a commercial setting.
Well, I don't believe that the public should have to do anything that the government doesn't have to do. So if you gotta have all of that requirement as a landscaper operating a private business, and you guys better be certified. Anybody who's holding the wand better have a license, because that's what everybody else is having to do.
And I hear you, and we had this
We're not the
discussion.
same. I understand what you're saying, but we're not the same, okay? We're totally not the same.
How so? Are
And
you
if
spraying?
you wanna just throw a broad brush and just say, well, because the public is doing it, the private sector is doing it, then why not make them do what we do? Because we're better than they are. And I'll put my agency and my staff up against any of your landscapers that most of them have no certification and have no understanding. I just don't see how we can't paint everybody with the same broad brush, we're all the same. Because we're all different in what we do. Those landscape companies don't have the requirements that my government agency requires of me. Okay, from training and professionalism, because the county, and not only do we require for our ability to apply pesticides, my government agency requires me to do many more things that landscaping company doesn't have to do. So we're not the same.
okay, all right, thank you.
I appreciate what you're saying, but we're not the same.
Looks like Charles has a question in the back, and then maybe after Charles's question, we've been going for about 2 hours, and want to keep this discussion going, but I'm sure people need to take a potty break and just end up and stretch, so. Go ahead, Charles.
Charles, I did what's bugging you, pest control. I have a question or two. Is there a provision in the regulation that addresses or gives the authority to you guys or the director on a case-by-case basis to make a determination what is required? Is there something like that, or can you add that?
They won't give you the.
The second question I have is on why is NRS different from NSC? The definitions there, are they supposed to be the same?
No. And Charles, Lynn Hetrick, the NRS is the authority to do something, and the NAC is the detail. They try not to get in at the legislative level into the detail of every single thing. They give the authority to write the detail to do the job you need done. Then that all has to go back to the legislature and get approved. So that's why the two are different. In terms of doing case by case, they seldom give us that kind of leeway, and frankly, even if they did, we wouldn't have the staff to go in and look at every single case and come up with a different license for every single thing. We simply couldn't do it. So whether we like it or not, we're kind of stuck with this broad brush. And finally, before we take a quick break, in response to the question about the landscapers and why doesn't governmental and public have to do all the same things, we'd probably be on your side. The problem is, when this goes to the legislature to get this change, if we said that, NDOT would be in there saying, do you know how much money this is going to cost us? Where's the money coming from? And the legislature's going to sit there and say, oh, no budget, sorry, we're not doing that, you're still going to spray the weeds. And we're going to get this kind of result. We're just recognizing reality here that it's not going to happen. But it simply won't happen because of budgets. So I don't disagree with you. If every single person out there is going to have a wand in their hand, they ought to have a license. but it won't happen.
Yes,
So we're trying to address reality.
I think that you've got to add another step in some hierarchy there for the private sector. It just seems, I mean, there's landscape companies that have hundreds of guys on crews. And if you're gonna tell them that, hey, don't worry, NDOT's exempt, but you're gonna have to license every one of those, you're gonna have to license 50 out of those 100.
Is everybody out of that 100 though applying pesticides?
Well, let's say you have 10 crews, right? You're gonna say there's only one guy per crew that can apply pesticides. Even if you say that, all well and good, you're still actually, asking now more requirements from.
And that's exactly why we're moving forward with this in the Gardner, because right now as it stands as a larger landscaping company, once you become a licensed pest control company as a part of your service, then all of your mow crew guys do have to get licensed. And it could kind of hurt the guys that were doing it correctly. Versus if we keep the incidental work clause as it stands now at 20%, it kind of inherits the pest control industry.
But you also have the shoulder-to-shoulder provision that Scott talked about. As long as you've got a licensed guy in that crew and they're standing there at the same job site continuously, the rest of the guys can spray.
That's all, no, that's great, and I totally agree with that, but you're talking about licensing 10 guys that have to be on that crew, right?
Yeah.
So that 10 guys, let's say it's 100 guys, whatever, 10-man crews for easy math, you still have to get 10 guys licensed, right? Every year. In addition to having a primary principal, right? So, I mean, that's starting to burden the private sector pretty heavily with what they have to have. Now, that is a similar thing in California, but that crew leader is a step-down license that falls underneath, say in this case, a primary principal. And that would be something else to consider, but you're asking a guy, it's one thing or the other,
But as it stands now, the incidental work clause is actually hurting the industry also because it's unfairly competing in the pest control industry. If they don't have to get licensed, then they could still do pest control work in upwards of 20% of the landscaping. Then that's hurting the pest control industry because they have to jump through hoops.
I feel it.
Yeah, so I mean that's why we're trying to really raise the bar, in the pest control industry by requiring landscaping companies that we know they're doing large scale commercial work just with backpacks to get them licensed so that they can do it correctly in a professional manner.
So, thank you, Sean, and I understand all that. Scott, I'd like to take a 5-minute break. Charles had his hand up again. Is he had a follow up with the same thing? What's that?
Yeah, he'll talk to me about it.
Okay, and then, so my next question is going to be, let's go ahead and go to break. We're not going to stop the recording, and the only reason why I'm saying that is if you want to have a side discussion, it may be recorded. And we will be posting this on our website, so if you're going to badmouth this, just or anybody else, just be cautious that it is still being recorded. And it's 11:15 now. Let's get back together at 11:25. Take a 5-10 minute break.
It's just like he was saying, I agree that everybody should be equal, but on the same note, government entities shouldn't be charged, because it's just like taking Ron Peter, they call it all taxpayer dollars, but the education should be there.
I care about who pays for it, but we're all gonna pay for it anyway.
It's all just a big one, like, the education should be there.
You just gotta get set up, you're gonna get taken out.
If you want to pay,
They are not business entities.
you can do that anytime.
The issue on this is. So,
Oh, yeah, but no.
This is a two different types of things. I understand it's a business license for us, for them to operate as a business. I get it, but.
You don't need all, if you have 100 people and you have 10-member crews.
True. The main area should be married and, I think you get some prices.
You would be
Without the 20% or any of that stuff, And doesn't that pretty much eliminate the gardener's division
Yes.
as a whole?
Yeah, those that they do.
And that turns anybody's division, so it would,
Yes.
in theory, eliminate
Again,
section
within 60 minutes.
four, which section 4 now, the
Okay,
definition of
but
gardener.
I took out the word gardener, so what says in that, because I did it to cover your entity. So what I took out was the word gardener, it just, and all I would do is add a section that says, the upstate typically works for a business, so it's the pesticide. Provides pest control services for general use pesticides for
Doing a restricted
must
use,
have,
that has to be
language must have.
Yes, yes.
I mean, that's, so how do we have to have some way to go back and
I can get in contact with anybody, they can contact me.
That puts the lane signal under
What's going on?
If they're doing residential work.
Correct.
Right? So that means that anybody who went into any application on a residential place would have to have their certificate. Not application, but an application or something. So that's, I think that's where the hierarchy is based, because if this is a less service, it's a certificate, we're gonna start with state.
Yeah, less than an application license.
What you must continue is.
Yeah, did the landscaper 4 years old?
Because we haven't accomplished, we're still on the first page.
And that puts you in
Gonna be a little longer.
Right.
That makes you have to have.
So now we had to.
You could do that for the, so you're thinking in terms of it's less costly for the landscaper to have.
That's what we're close to.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that I would say that. And I've got the photo.
This is the.
You either understand.
That's one of the things.
You can have a primary principle, you have to take all categories of
Or if the
and
next
then
time
you
you
step down
down,
and just get the application. I'm a primary principal, I've got all my stuff. I'm gonna do all the guys.
And they will be.
We've done it twice now with your two other categories.
Yeah.
So,
Justin, good to see you.
I didn't know we have it.
I mean, I think the primary principle is a different deal.
So, one of the questions that you got.
So if that's.
Your staff, what do they want, what do they want?
Primary principle.
You have had a long email string. Why do they want to? But if you did, that shows them what it looks like. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
If you're doing application
But one of the questions that we asked the principal is, and what's the difference between
basically be an analogous
that's like supplying and here there's nothing. Because where you are.
And we can, instead of our, yeah, yep.
So here, we're saying.
I don't certify my pieces, but I want to. No, and I don't want to either, because they're not, well, they may be right, but go ahead and take, right, and we're gonna have time to go ahead and have them. For mixers, loaders, that's all. I've got that was the car.
You are where we are to say right now. But down here, we have non, this is.
What if you had without
Just to suggest body cameras for.
Is there a way that you can?
You ship all those to the department bag and they can inspect the same or do a scratch job. Body comes out of my wall. You go back to
Oh, bro, that was my
Okay, so I'm just trying to.
Chris has a lot of that. That's my for multiple licenses.
We're not charge history. Yeah. You're right. What I'm saying is we're mixing so you know what? Which means you should be investors. And that's where the only issue I have is so weird because I don't know how many they got a lot. And I have it's really going to be the point of I mean, I just don't write a I got to run all through that. Because that would be the question for people. I got to weigh all that. I think you can get to close. Whereas the national one, here's the one getting over. They don't want to you know, you can keep that going. Yes, I know. And step it down so that you have your couple so 60 miles in you go to Clark County or Elko County or Washington County. I mean, there's places you can get to 6 miles. So you I usually see that like not like what is on perfect. We all know they're you know what I mean, like the pollution. It's they are not like for hire. Like these one around or something or outside like on you know I'm not ready to leave because or we I got it. That would make they don't have to
Matt, thank you very much for coming up here.
You know, you should not have a guy running my crew that's right there. His guys are there.
I think I hear you. I get it. We're trying. When we get the language in that one, best under safety first against this we're trying to get it there. They have all this and he did have the meeting, and so we're going to have a follow-up workshop on that. All of these stores out. We'll schedule that 30 You'll be on the it stays with you.
He's probably for 4 years.
Mike, I know for example, license issued without board to get a house guy. Why? A couple of full license get shot at. In your area, they want to.
Well, I gotta put it in there. There's gonna be another follow-up.
For this one, I'm not sure where we're going yet, but there is a follow-up for the one we had on Monday, and then, I don't know if it's gonna be a follow-up meeting, or we're just gonna send out, revised language, and then try to get comments on that. So, we want one of those.
Good.
And non-commercial.
All right, guys, good luck.
Thanks, Matt.
Make sure, like I said, in case you don't know, what county for his purpose, keep that, it's recorded. It's on public record.
So you got first spray. The reason they tell us to spray, so now you're gonna charge me.
No, I scheduled the room all day long.
Thanks, Robert.
You want to leave it for me, you
Out of there.
I guarantee. Yeah, okay.
Conflicting with the agricultural use requirement.
No, real simple, anybody doing it for profit needs a PCO license.
Yes. We lost one piece.
Mixing.
I regulate it, because you keep running in circles.
I looked at this picture yesterday. Always two ways to solve the issue. Work it out or see it. Attrition.
It's good to be out there.
Yeah.
Three people left in your head.
Yeah, I know.
That's exactly what. In the morning, they're really paying.
Yeah.
Call me.
Oh.
Please. They were fighting over some kind of water thing. And by the time we got up there was 3 people in the room, and the commissioner.
Yeah. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want.
We can go, yes. But we were pretty good, because we got there like at 11, thinking we were on.
The public comment section went so long because they didn't stop people from making the same comment over and over and over again.
On the wall, they were lying.
Yeah.
It doesn't say the same, but she doesn't understand, it has to.
All right.
Voted for the.
Okay. So, Scott, I see you guys have got a conversation going there. I don't want to stop good conversation, but are we ready to start back up again?
Yeah, so just to give you a quick background, the Nevada Pest Management Association is leaving.
Okay.
I've discussed what they have, and I'll bring that to you guys. But they're
Hey, really quick, while Nevada Pest Management Association is still there, this is separate from this meeting. You guys were going to meet regarding our workshop and talk about some of that language that we had in our workshop. When will that be, and when will you be getting back to us so we can then schedule for the repeat workshop?
I met with Joey Toth, the president, a couple other board directors on Friday.
Okay.
And we sent what we thought should be changed a little bit. We sent that to some of our lawyers and the lawyers with the National Pest Management Association. We're waiting for them to get back, and then I'll get a hold of Scott to schedule another workshop. That work for you?
Yeah, that's fine. I was just looking at a timeline, that's all.
Yeah, probably the next few days. I was told on Friday, maybe Wednesday, Thursday.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Hey, no problem. Yeah, we're waiting for them to get back to us.
So, plan for beginning of November, and we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for coming.
That's the best pen you can write with today.
Instead of my little. Okay, so it looks like it's just me right now.
No, there's
Well, I
more
see.
to look at, but please work on it.
They're still having side discussions. Okay, we'll see you guys.
Well, I'd like to continue on, Scott. I don't want to get into this and then, touch back on it. If somebody comes in the room and they want to, I don't want to go backwards, I guess. So should we ask if Chris and other government entities that are there want to come back into the room? This is the time to do it.
I think they do. They're just in side discussions.
Come back and tell, as soon as they come in, thank you very much for coming. I'm glad we got everything settled.
And so, and I missed your name. Sorry. Thank you. The gentleman, Elko. Thank you for sitting through. Did you have anything? Because we've been going back and forth between Reno or Sparks and Las Vegas. Is there anything that you had that you wanted to add at this time? I guess before we get back into things. I didn't know if we skipped over you or if you didn't feel that you could ask questions. So I'd like to get your input if you've got something that you'd like to add.
Now I'm just listening.
Okay. I just didn't want to cut you out. I didn't want to include you as well, so.
Don't that I haven't.
Okay.
All right, so
Let's address what, so Scott, you had sent me a text saying if we take out section 9 sub 2, and so that's on page number 1, section 9 sub 2 was a person who is a government applicator, must comply with the business licensing provisions and applicator licensing provisions of this chapter. You said if we took out that, it had an effect on section 1. And so Lynn had a question. Go ahead.
So the thought there is, when we worked on this, is that if we just reference the business licensing, then it would go to the business licensing section. And I believe we talked later on that we wanted to have a government agency license, an entity that we can identify with those applicators. So that's why we put section 1 in there, is to differentiate it from our current custom licensed business licensing and made it more specific to a government agency entity license or a government agency license. That's the only place in the whole government applicator that it actually identifies anything to do with a business. So by striking number 2, nowhere else in the government entity realm from section 9 to 13 does it talk about a business. Everything there is individual. So by taking 2 out completely, you're eliminating any discussion on a government entity by doing that.
And I think that's a good idea. Again, instead of certifying or licensing, whichever it's going to end up, again, Chris Bramlett, Clark County Vector Control, I think it's more important that for government, it's the individual employee that holds the knowledge and the key. You know, there are times where I'm in a business meeting and my guys are out doing work. I want to know that my guys know what they're doing. I've given them assignments, and I have faith and knowledge that they're going to go out and make all the right decisions and do everything, and I can hold them accountable, as can the government agency. When we talk about liability within the government, it is crucial that the employee is empowered in government agency. He's empowered to make the right decision. You know, we may have some discussion on what the ultimate goal of the project is, but I give them the leeway to choose the correct pesticide for the job. So the entity, ultimately, us as the employees, we're ultimately responsible, as is our government agency. So if my guys go out and they're spraying right away, and they're using a turbine blower, and they're blowing a pesticide 5 houses away, and affecting dogs and animals and cats, they're going to be held accountable, as is the agency. But because of our training and certificate and our applicator knowledge, we don't make those decisions. We don't do those things. Anybody that makes those things ought to be ran out of the business. If they don't understand the ramifications of making an application that is not correct, then they shouldn't be licensed, certified, or in the business. And that's why we go to great lengths in training our staff, in having the correct equipment for the correct job. We talk our projects over. We understand non-targets. We understand what can happen to an application if it's misapplied. So I think it's critical that the staffing in government agencies have the certificate or are the government applicator. Then if you as the state require me as the supervisor to have something additional on top of that, well, I'm open for that. But it's critical that when my guys are in a neighborhood, we call them NPZs, and they're driving down the street and Mrs. Jones stops them and says, hey guys, what are you doing? What are you using? They get out, they are personable, they explain to that person, that constituent, the herbicide that they're using, they show them the label, they show them the SDS, they tell them why they're doing it, and if those people have a concern or a care, they take the time to explain to them, you know, the ability of what they're doing and how they're trained to make that application. That's what's critical to our constituents, that our staff, we're not just a bunch of guys that lean up against a shovel that don't know what we're doing. Same thing on my black fly program down on the Colorado River, okay?
Right,
There isn't any of my staff that, and Chuck Moses can attest to that, I've had him out to certify my program, as do I with my NPDS, that our staff is trained, okay? The NPDS requires that our staff is trained in the aspects of what we're doing. So, you know, they hold the certificate right now as it is. They hold the knowledge, they hold the key. And as for me, I think that's what government agencies should be. We should be the leaders. You know, we should be better than anybody else. I said earlier, we were talking about commercial licensing and this and that and the other. On your licensing, how many investigations have you had in the last 10 years against your licensees versus your government certified applicators? You know, you talk about which is more important to have, is this is stronger, more stringent. I guarantee you've got more investigations with your commercial applicators than you have with any of us.
Well, I can't really speak to that because, you know, I don't have those numbers in front of me. Quite frankly, there's a lot more commercial applicators than there are government entities too.
I understand that, but the point I'm trying to make is that, at least in my realm, I can't speak for everybody in the state of Nevada. You know, where we are at, Robert, from the very first time we talked about CWMAs, and that all of those participants in the CWMAs are mostly governments, and most of those groups are made up of, you know, certified applicators, some are licensees. All of us go to great lengths to make sure that we're knowledgeable and very good at what we do. So I just
don't disagree with you.
You know, I just can't stress that enough. I appreciate the landscapers that have many landscapers within their crews, and they're out doing these large projects. And if I had a crew of 10 guys with backpacks, I'd make sure one of them was working with those 10 that was licensed, because it's a commercial business. He's got a license, and he's talking to his crew every morning, and he's keeping an eye on those 10 guys. So if you've got 50 guys out doing these large projects, you need 5 guys that oversee the group, plus the one principal commercial guy that owns the group. How is that a burden?
Well, we agree with you that the government agencies ought to lead the way and be the best at it, and I mean, that's not an issue for us, and we understand that, you know, you're fortunate in Clark County to have that kind of support and the money to do it. A lot of people don't, and we're still having to deal with the issues that remain, whether we like it or not. So we're trying to get there. I'd like to go back a little bit to the business licensing provisions that Scott just talked about. And I guess I'm concerned with the language. Maybe we need to have something there that says, other than the word business licensing, and maybe it just needs to say a government applicator must provide with the provisions of this chapter, or something like that if you're worried about it. The reason I balked at the business license application is kind of what we just came back to. A pest control operator, which is a business licensee, has to have all of his people licensed. If we say that you have to follow all of the business license provisions, then we're contradicting ourselves as I see it. And so I don't think we can say business license provisions. I think if we say something else, we might be able to apply all the rest of the things in the chapter. And I see where you're going, Scott, but I think it's just, again, semantics that we need to fix.
And what I want to say, Lynn, too, is, you know, what we've currently got, we're only focusing on the applicators, it looks like, from section 9 through 13.
Yes.
There's nothing about a business. And that's what I was saying about number 2. That's the only place that we actually mention anything about the business itself. And I'm assuming the business is the government agency. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's my using when it says government applicators as the lead line for section 9. and we change
So
it.
my thought might be is we need to put in a section 14 into this, that actually, whatever the group in discussion comes up with, actually come up with what is going to be required of a government agency, and I don't want to say business, but, you know, a government entity, and what that is. Because right now, all we have is section 1 that defines it, but we got nothing to relate it to. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it'd be
There's
clearer.
nothing
if
that
we did
relates
that.
to section 1 in here.
Well,
Can I make a suggestion on that reference? Chris Bramley, Clark County Vector Control. In section 1 where it says government agency license as defined, what if the state issues government agencies a certificate to do the work? Okay, therefore, we prove to the state that we are competent and capable and able by whatever means. You then determine through the government applicator in the NAC later on that you require government applicators to go through whatever it is that you require us. You issue us a certificate of, like we issue in the government, we issue a certificate of occupancy. Okay, so you issue this residence a certificate that allows for the occupancy, the act of occupying. So if you therefore then issue us a certificate that allows for the act of general use and restricted use type activities, then we must meet the criteria by individual status of the staff of that government agency.
Well, I thought, Chris, that we agreed to that already. Did we change that type of certificate?
I'm sorry, I had to eat my food very quick and my mind is.
Yeah.
So
no problem.
if we agree to that, I apologize for wasting your time.
Yeah, no, we said we were going to change it to a certificate, and we changed that language to certificate. That's fine.
Okay.
I think the issue in my mind, and I think what Scott's addressing is, we haven't said anywhere specifically that where we struck the business licensing provisions. In business licensing provisions, it says there has to be a primary principal and there has to be a licensed applicator and all those things. By striking the business licensing provisions, we've stricken all of it. And what I was trying to strike was the part that said every single person has to be licensed. What I was trying to do is get it to where we had somebody who would have oversight on the crew, and not every single person, which is required in a business license, to make it work. I think what Scott was saying is, okay, if you're going to do that, then we got to go back and at least put in the things that we do have to have. And that is at least the one person who is licensed. Somebody would have to be licensed in each of the fields that they have to go to. If it's one person, good for them. If it's 5, that's fine too. We don't care. However it is, somebody has to be licensed in the appropriate field if they're going to do the work. I think that's the intent where we need to go with the suggestion of Scott's, which would be either a section 14 or something added to section 9, or maybe at the start of section 9. I'm not sure where. I think we can get there. Most of the rest of this, where it says license, where it's talking about government, we would change to certificate. We would be adding some kind of a certificate if we choose to go that way. And what's the gentleman's name, Matt? Matt, yeah, I wasn't sure. I talked a little bit with Matt on the break, and to be as candid with all of you as I was with Matt, the issue we have in part of this is we are a fee-based agency. Whether we like it or not, we run on the fees we generate. And we're not going to get general fund money, and we still have a requirement under statute to do the job we do. If we start certificating a lot of people, then we can do away with maybe some license. If we license more people, we can do away with certificates. We're not trying to make more money here, but we have to cover our expenses, whether we like it or not. That part's mandatory. So we have to be able to weigh a little bit where we go with this. We're not, again, it's not a money-making provision. If the right way to go is certificate all these people who might be out on a cruise spraying, and it's a $5 certificate, I guess I'm just picking numbers, so don't.
Don't hold it.
Yeah, don't hold me to that, it might be 500, no. Okay, maybe that's what we have to do and the way we have to go. Maybe because we eliminate some other step somewhere along the way, we have to offset, we figure it out. But I just want you to understand, we're not trying to make money, and we're not just jumping up to say, well, that certificate cost all these people and more expense. We're trying to cover the bills and still do the right thing, which is the most important part of this.
Hey, Lynn.
Please, Rob.
Rob Hawley, Dayton Valley Conservation District. There's been some discussion since government was broken out of business licensure requirements on how to qualify a government entity to apply a herbicide or a pesticide.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you've already got that in section 9, subsection 1. A person who is a government applicator shall not use any pesticides in this state, except a person using that under the indirect supervision of a government applicator. So you still provide that hierarchy for someone in the field to be spraying as long as that indirect application or indirect supervision is met.
So it's still
So really, unless you want to add another layer of certification above that, which I wouldn't think is necessary, but I think you still have the provision to streamline the certification process for a government entity as long as they maintain that indirect supervision over the people who are actually doing the applications. And for me personally, I would like to see someone on the crew with that certification. We'll need to have more than one anyway, because an hour is reasonable, but if someone's not there, then your crew doesn't spray. So we would have someone on the crew as well as somebody else anyway. But I think you have that provision already met.
And so, Rob, you're suggesting you don't need the government entity, and the only reason I think that we might want the government entity, and I'd have to talk probably to the Attorney General's office, is liability interests, whether or not they are certified as an applicator somehow for their own liability benefit.
And you can certainly do that by requiring that the manager of the CWMA or the Conservation District, or somebody that's in that position, be certified as a government applicator, so that you have established then that someone in authority within that organization has received the proper training and certification.
Not a principal, but a government.
Correct. Yeah, it would be different than a
Keep that
principal.
to prop the people away from our category.
And I think you can allow that within the framework of what you have here by simply allowing that government entity to meet the qualifications by having a certified applicator in the office.
Right. Yeah. And I hear you, and I'm thinking about that, and I think we could do that. I think then, quite frankly, I think the certificate for that government person who has the certificate, we strip in the word license. But I think that certificate is basically going to be the exact same thing as a license, because we're back to the categories and everything else that somebody we have to know. We can't just give them a RUP. I think you're going to have a license in the various fields, all the categories.
So did we decide the CWMAs are a government agency? Because that's what Rob's.
Well, I don't think they technically are, but I think he was kind of proposing that if you had a certified government applicator overseeing them somehow or on the crew, they would be all right.
Well, ours is probably different because our CWMA operates under the authority of our conservation district. And the board is the same board, and once a year they have a meeting related to the CWMA. So it's probably a little bit different. It doesn't exist separate from the conservation district, in other words. So that wouldn't work in the case of a CWMA that does not operate under a conservation district.
Right.
It's whatever you want to call it, certification, licensure, it all amounts to the same.
I know. CWMAs, we know, are a tricky situation altogether because they all operate in a ton of different ways. Not all of them are actually nonprofits. some of them under, I mean, if you look at, and not to throw, just to put names out there, but, so Betsy McFarland with the Eastern Nevada Landscape Coalition, she oversees 9 to 10 CWMAs right now. They're all like a subdivision of the Eastern Nevada Land Coalition, in essence. They don't have the correct documentation to be a 501(c) nonprofit or something else. And so we're trying to talk to Betsy, and unfortunately she wasn't able to be here today. We're trying to get her in on another meeting to see really how we can get CWMAs to fit into this. And I think the discussion that you started, Rob, this goes above and beyond CWMAs in general. But just as kind of so those who are involved in CWMAs know that we're trying to see how we can get them covered or in some way, be incorporated or be part of the county that they operate in. Knowing that some CWMAs actually go over multiple counties too, makes it, then it becomes, well, maybe where the work was done in which county they become a part of at that time. And so that's kind of where we were going with CWMAs. There's a lot of great with CWMAs, and they're doing really good work. We don't want to, push away from the work that they're doing, because we know that there's a lot of them who are doing a lot of good work. We just don't know how to incorporate them in at this time into this, and that's what we're working more with in regards to CWMAs.
It may be a part of why we want to have that government agency, because then if a county does it or some governmental agency they can be tied to picks up the license, they can do it. Then they can operate under that, and we'd be okay. They'd be okay, because we know they're not trying to compete with anybody. They're doing work that probably wouldn't get done otherwise. Trying to do it the cheapest possible way, and that's all good stuff. We certainly don't want to infringe on it if we can help. So, all right. Okay. So, what else? Anybody have a question on? They want to see defined differently, or they. What else?
So can I make one comment about CWMAs?
Please, Chris, go ahead.
Robert, as you know, we started our CWMA off, and then some issues have happened, and it was always my intent for our CWMA as the county to kind of be the overseer of the project, because all of the work is done in Clark County. Mm-hmm. And again, I've got to apologize for the way that happened back then. It broke down, and I probably should have stayed in the position that I was in, but I got my butt chewed out. But as time has gone by, and this issue, and after the conversations that I just heard, I don't think that I could have an issue with the county kind of being the lead agency in our CWMA, because a lot of the work that Johnny and the group have been doing lately has been in kind of my area.
Right.
Laughlin, all of our flood channels and stuff like that. We've been doing a ton of green fountain grass work, tamarisk work, and other issues like that. So once this meeting is over, I get a meeting with my director this week, I will propose to him that he puts me, or allows me to become a part of the Southern Nevada CWMA group again.
That'd be great.
I was pulled off of it, and then no further discussion. So I will move that along. Rusty manages Clark County Water Reclamation District property, which down in the area of the wetlands, we have some serious issues. But since I was pulled off, it basically pulled him off. But I will send an email to Johnny, and I keep in touch with Johnny quite frequently. But I will send him an email this week, if not tomorrow, tonight or tomorrow, that I will seek approval from my bosses to join and see how it is that the county can help in these issues that we're talking about. Training, certified applicators, license, wherever it may go, having the public involved, working with John Hyatt and the group, and see how we can make that a better program. It already is a great program now, but to try and improve upon it, I will make that pledge here right now.
Thank you, Chris. I think that's great. I'd love to have you involved in that CWMA, because they're doing a lot of great work, and I think having the county involved in them could only be better. That being said, hopefully we can, getting back to what we've got on hand here, hopefully we can find a way to, if the CWMA does go under the county there, that we can, qualify the CWMA as a government entity to continue to do the work that they do on some level, is what we're really shooting for there. So
Maybe even some kind of MOU as we currently have, because as you know, most of the members of our Southern Nevada CWMA are government agencies. So
right.
I know they're trying to get more signatures on that MOU, and like I said, I will further that along on my side.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
I want to direct you as we're reading here, and I'm reading here, let me direct you to page 4, NRS 5552667, the first black one, paragraph at the top. Pest control means public holding oneself out as being in the business of detecting blah, blah, blah. Or otherwise advertising, engaging in advertising or soliciting for. Do we need to add a category? I guess I'm kind of asking if Scott's there, or Jay, or both, and all of you. Do we need to add a little bit to that definition? Because if you look at section 1, assuming we keep section 1, and I think there's still some thought about that we need to work through, but it says, by the department for engaging in pest control. And I'm not sure that the definition of pest control then fits for a government agency certificate.
Maybe you should put in for profit.
No, now we struck the for hire on purpose. I think he was being sarcastic in that remark, yes.
How about the word publicly? That's, I think, the key, right? Pest control means publicly holding one's self out as being in the business of. I think that publicly is the word that needs to change. Pest control means a public agency or one who holds himself out as being in the business of detecting, preventing, controlling, or exterminating pests, or otherwise engaging in advertising and soliciting for.
I wonder if it needs to say pest control means detecting, preventing, controlling, or exterminating pests.
Well, no, I think pest control stays in the beginning.
Yeah, no,
pest
but
control means.
Yeah, no, that was my point, was I think what I'm wanting to strike is means publicly holding oneself out as being in the business.
Okay.
Right. Yes.
It's
We're not
the
in
business.
We're not in
yeah,
business.
and yet you're in pest control.
Right.
So what I'm trying to say is the definition would say pest control means detecting, preventing, controlling, or exterminating pests or otherwise engaging in. And then it picks up the business side, otherwise engaging in.
You're right.
That sounds, yes.
Jay, is Scott in there?
He's right outside.
I'm just curious if either Jay, you or Scott see any reason why if we take that out with the rest of the language that you have throughout this whole chapter, if there's anything that ties back to that we need to be cognizant of.
I think that would clear up the for hire part, but I don't know if there's anything in here that I would change.
Well, yeah, but by removing publicly holding oneself out as being in the business of, does that really mess up anything else that's in this chapter? I don't see that it would, but I just, you guys know these chapters in and out better than I do, and Lynn. So I'm just curious if we change that there, if we have to, since we're trying to do NRS and we only get one shot every 2 years, to make sure that we get it correct.
I don't believe it does. I can't think of anything other than coming back to the landscaper stuff that we've already gone over a bunch of times.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about. I don't want that language to miss us.
Right, and that's why was hoping that Scott, if he had wanted to weigh in on that, he could.
Well, it still can't.
It still can't.
We're going to redraft this and then do this again, I think. So.
Yeah. Okay,
He's talking to Charles, he'll be right in.
all right.
No, he'll be in.
All right, is there anything else anybody sees that they want to address? I mean, most of the rest of this, as we discussed at the start, was clarification. We'll clean up the license and certificate language.
Jim Schaefer, Health District, on page 6, bottom, you know, we hold, and Bud brought this up, but our licenses are good for 4 years, or renewable after 4 years.
So you're talking about the restricted use certificate, correct?
Yes.
Not a license?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So here, it seems it's upon the applications of the director, so there's no, like, every 2 years to go ahead and renew it, or every 3 years, or every 4 years.
Yeah, we like that set.
It should be set.
A set timeframe, 4 years is great.
EPA's recommending 3.
Right, so, yeah, that's coming off of the new worker protection standards, off the EPA,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah, and all the change to the restricted use guidelines.
Certification might change to 3.
If we just fix it all to 3, gonna live with that.
And so we have a set thing.
What are we talking
And
about?
so do we want to go in here?
Renewal? No, we want to take that out.
I think, well, yeah, I think how about, I think the reason it's written like it is, if I'm following this correctly, and that's 555-320 sub 2, says that the license period must be defined by regulation by the director. I think that was to allow us to comply with the EPA rule, and that was trying to give us the flexibility to do that. I suppose we could change that language if you're more comfortable to say comply with or match, or what's the word I want, the EPA rule.
Are we?
So hold on. There's 2 different places. One is restricted use certificate back in 357, which right now says 4 years.
Yes.
That one we want to take to, that's their RUP certificate. And because of the federal guidelines that are coming out, they're proposing a 3-year renewal. I don't know that it's actually been set yet. I know it's been proposed. So what we would like to do here is ask the legislature to allow us to define that in the NAC, so that it's easier to be changed as people make changes to their programs. We don't have to go through the legislative realm to get those things changed.
And that was what I was trying to address.
Yeah.
So my only point is, I think they're asking for it to be more fixed than just set by the directors, what they're saying. And I don't think we have a problem with that. I mean, it looks to me like, if anything, they're shortening the time frame. And that's not going to make us mad. So I think what my suggestion would be in both 357 and perhaps in 320 is, can we change that language to something that says to comply with or match or whatever the wording is, the EPA requirements.
I mean, this is just statute, though. This gives us, can be defined by the director. Great. And then when we get through, if this all gets approved, can't we then set it in NAC?
You can, but I think, again, what they're asking for is they want more definitive in NRS. They don't want they're saying they don't want it to be that flexible in that. Is what that's what I'm hearing.
So I'm sorry I stepped out of the room for a little bit, so I think I missed something there.
Well, there was simply a question of the fact that we're changing it from fixed time periods to the time period of the license must be set by regulation. And they were saying we'd prefer to see that be a fixed period of time. We're, I think, trying to deal with the fact that EPA controls parts of this, and we don't control the fixed period of time. So what my suggestion was simply to say that the license period would comply with the EPA recommendation, or something like that. And that would satisfy both parties.
Mr. Ryan's got a question.
Ed Ryan, Mason Valley, Smith Valley Conservation Districts. Because we're not in control of what the feds do with the regulations and changing the time frames, I I don't think it's a problem having the law state this, that the
Right.
director will set the time, and then the administrative code define the time, because it's, the administrative code still has the effect of defining how we operate. And but if then the feds come and change the rules again, you don't have to go back to the legislature to change that time frame.
Right, and that's the way I was looking at it. I like it that way. And my other thing that I take possibly an issue with the way that you defined it out there, Lynn, is if we say, it follows the guidance of the EPA, we haven't defined yet when government entities, if they're on a 1-year basis, a 2-year basis, a 3-year basis. If we say flat out that we follow the guidance of the EPA, that's what everybody's attached to. And so I like leaving it the way it is, must be defined by regulation by the director. That gives us the ability to set it however we want in code, instead of trying to define it in statute.
I hear you perfectly. I'm just trying to relay what I heard them say.
And I think that's agreeable. Is that agreeable to you? As long as we have a defined period.
Well, I think the other side of that, I think that's where Robert's really going, is you want to realize that we don't just willy-nilly get to go change the NAC. To do it, we have to have workshop, a hearing, and it has to go to the legislative commission. People have the opportunity to come in and testify, to disagree, to do whatever. I mean, we don't just get to tomorrow say, well, here's the new code, we've changed it to a year. It takes a whole process. It takes 6 months and a bunch of years.
It's by regulation of the director. If he changes his mind,
Yeah, but
the
regulation of the director
Still has to go through
the same act.
It has to go through the rulemaking process, even though it's by the regulation of the director. And then the other thing is here, I think, to keep in mind that if this does get passed through the legislature and we go this route, we are going to have to set all of the NACs to go with this, and there will be a series of workshops and hearings as how we define how this goes forward. This is the authority to do it, and then the way that it gets conducted will all have to go through workshop and hearing if this actually gets adopted. So
yeah, the part by the director means simply the director can say to us, we've got to rewrite the NAC to comply with whatever standard we want. Do the work, do the workshops, do the hearings, take it to the legislative commission, get approval. You'll have 3 shots at input on any NAC we write, whether it says by the director, by the board, or it doesn't say at all. So I don't think it's an issue. I'm just trying to respond to your request, can we fix it? I think it's fine. Any other questions or issues?
When are you proposing to submit this to the legislature?
It's already submitted. We had to turn this into the governor's office 3 or 4 months ago or before, and they said, yes, pick it up. We submitted this basic language to give them an idea of what we were trying to do. But the way we would like to do this is we would like to draft this again now with the input that we've had. We'd like to have another one of these meetings where you folks can come in, read the draft again, say, okay, yeah, it looks like you fixed that. No, we still don't like this. Let's fix that. The idea would be that the day we walk in the legislature, all the same people that walked in these rooms today would walk in and say, we got to meet with the Department of Ag 4 times, fix this, here's the amendments we think you should incorporate, and we all support this. That would be what we'd like to have. That would be the best of all worlds. Can we get to that and everybody going to be 100% happy? Maybe not, but we're trying. That's why we're holding this meeting now. We'd like to have that be the situation. And so what will happen, this is probably a pre-filed bill, which means that what will happen with this is it'll get heard fairly early. It's kind of a nuts and bolts bill. It's not a budget bill or, raising taxes. So it'll probably get heard early. And that's why we'd like to have it be pretty much consensus. People would walk in and say, yeah, it's not perfect, but we're okay. We get it. We know what you're trying to do. And hopefully we can get it changed and move on. Do these fixes.
Jim Schaefer again, in the bottom of page 1, number 7. You might want to go ahead and define what a natural person is. And that was brought up to me. I think I know what you're talking about, but it is a little ambiguous. Unless you
Number
refer to
seven.
yeah,
Number
natural
two.
born person, is that what your intent? I don't know what you mean by a
Talking
natural
about it
person.
grown.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Number two, 7.2.
7.2 natural person.
Yeah, that means that it's a business or some kind of a business entity, not a natural person.
Yeah, that's.
I think that's defined in statute elsewhere. I went through that the other day looking for it, but
Okay.
I believe that it's defined elsewhere, yeah.
Oh, that.
Individual person.
Through us.
I think natural person is a legal term used by the legislature to mean a you and me, a human being. If it's a business entity, then it's not a natural person.
Oh, it's the way that it's defined.
That's the way it's looked at.
Okay.
Not as in having legal, ability to be in this country or something like that.
No, it has nothing to do with.
Well, I was talking, like I said, does that mean it's a droid? Does it mean it's not a natural person? Is it a?
Yeah, no, I think that's what it means is, I think it's a term, as to whether they call it a term of art or whatever, but its standard use is, it means it's not a human being.
Okay. Does anybody, I have a couple questions I want to ask really quick. So regardless, and this is getting kind of back into the topic where we were with certificate and license and, what we're going to call it and how we go about doing it. So if it's going to be a certificate or a license, whatever it's going to be, I'm assuming, we're looking at being in the realm of being under a category for that type of work. You can't just have a certificate that covers you for all pest control work. If you're doing a fumigant or if you're doing a spray for herbicides or an insecticide or anything else like that. And so if we're doing certificates as opposed to a license, however you want to define that, are we still under the impression, this is so we can draft this, how we want to look at it, are we getting certificates within those categories? So I know where we're going with when we're drafting this.
Yes.
Chris, you got your hand up there too?
Yeah, and that's what I think, is that you issue the certificate, and then you have to qualify for those individual categories.
Okay.
I mean, like with us, we have public health, mosquito, right-of-way, aquatic, all of the current topics or subject headers that you currently have in the system would then apply to, like, for us. So we have a certificate to do the work, and then we're also certified in the categories.
And great. Right, and that's why I just want to make sure that we were all on the same page, that the certificate wasn't just like an RUP, is just, this covers all you have to be certified in that category. I just want to make sure we were all.
You have the license and you have the very individual categories within that license.
I almost think we go back to the categories and where it says license now, in this category, you say license or certificate. Yeah, and then that's the end of it. It just covers it, and then you issue
You just need to split the exam, because right now you've got 50 for general and 20 per category. Well, those 20 per category shouldn't be in the RUP exam anymore. They should be with the pesticide exam, in the category for pesticide, for your pesticide license. Restricted use certificate shouldn't have categories on it. It should be chemically aligned.
No. Restricted use certificates have to have categories. That's part of the federal requirement.
We don't need to change tests.
No, and we know that, a number of the tests that we have out there for categories and stuff are a little outdated, and we are looking at, revamping all the tests. It's just been a hard road with the staffing that we've had and some other things that we're doing. One of the things that we are really looking forward to when we go online is it'll actually free up a lot of our staff to revise those exams and the technology and the things that are in those exams. Some of them go all the way back to the 50s, and so some of it's outdated material, and we're aware of that, and so we're trying to revise all of that as well. So, but
we want to keep you up to date.
Yeah.
So we're testing you for the business.
So I guess, that opens up to, does anybody, I think we've kind of gone through all this. We didn't go by each page. As Lynn mentioned, getting into the starting after page 5 really, is just all, changing, a little bit of language in there to say applicator and things like that. Did we cover everything? Is there anything else that some people have some questions about? Is there still some thoughts that maybe we didn't cover everything to where you'd like to see it go? Rob, I see you've got your hand there.
I've got one question. Rob Hawley from Dayton Valley Conservation District. We have staff that work 10 or 11 months, and they engage in pest control, weed control primarily, for a 5 to 6 month period. So the amount of time they would devote to that would be less than 1,039 hours. Then they go on to do river projects and bioengineering and fuels reduction and other things. So I don't know if that qualification could be reworded to stipulate a maximum amount of time spent on pest control instead of a term of employment.
So I think, Scott, if I'm not mistaken, we require all of the licensed applicators to keep a logbook of, everything that they do. A records, that records book that we put out, if we had a records book, again, for government entities, or maybe it's on the same one, where they can log the hours that were spent doing pest control work, for a conservation district or whatever else, so we know that their staff only spent so much time on pest control work. Do you think that, that's something that we could work with on that language when we get into that 1039 rule and stuff like that?
I think Lynn, at one point we discussed all this, and it became down to, do we have the time to go look at their logbooks? Do we have time to go count up their hours? I think it just became, if you're employed in a position that is more than 1039, then you're a full-time employee and you got to be licensed.
Okay. And I understand where Rob's going with this, so, where they hire people on for the time of the period that you could be out actually in the field doing stuff when, it's not covered in snow and things like that. So how do we fix that?
How about the honor system? If he tells you,
Well, quite frankly, I think the logbooks are an honor system anyway. We don't have the time for the staff to go out and check everybody's logbooks in the pest control business unless something comes up. So
if he tells you, if he reports, however he reports, that his staff only did so much, I'm sure he's not going to fib it out. It's like when we talk about work reports, we have very detailed work reports, and we follow the RUP guidelines for keeping our reports, and all of them in there specifically detail all of that information. So if you wanted to put in language maybe that you want an audit, I don't know, that you have the ability as the director to audit, and they provide that information, that way that information is always there. But I think the honor system is a good way to go.
I don't really have a problem with that.
Yeah, it kind of opens another can of worms too. Bud Stinson makes by mosquito. Along those lines, how many hours do any of us actually spend spraying? If you're gonna, that part-time, full-time definition, it kind of needs to stick where it's at, because then you're trying to break a full-time employee into only part-time spraying versus, I don't spray every day. I probably don't spray 1,039 hours a year. So does that make me fall into the part-time class? According to the way you're kind of going, it would. But yeah, I'm still a full-time employee. So.
And that's why we just said what we said, is because we don't have the ability to go out and audit everybody.
Right, and that makes total sense. It does. That's the way to do it.
I think what we're doing is saying, within reason, as we just said, nobody's going to come audit, and it's the honor system. It's basically that. If it's a seasonal employee and they work 11 months, it's a seasonal employee. I think that's the way you're looking at it. I don't think we're going to come out and argue with you. That's your employee.
Jim Schaefer, Health District. We hire public health interns from University of Nevada, Reno. We cannot exceed 1,039 hours for them. And the reason why we can't exceed is that if they exceed that, then we have to go ahead and pay them unemployment. And we don't, the health district doesn't want to go ahead and do that. Not only with the interns, but if we have seasonals, if they were seasonal, we even have it with our office support person, which is also part-time. She cannot exceed that 1,039 either. So for me, I like that number as opposed to the 640.
The definition's already out there.
And we went with the 1039 because that's really what the state abides by. And so, we're getting into the same things here, is that anybody that goes over 1039 is no longer considered to be a seasonal as far as the state is concerned. And so if you've got somebody that the conservation district hires on for, 10 and 11 months, I like where Chris is going with it. It's kind of an honor system type of thing. How does that work as far as how do we regulate that? Really, what's the law? How is it actually written? I don't know how we go.
I also think there are issues beyond unemployment. I think there might be Obamacare and all the rest that fall into place there. And I think you're probably going to police this a lot better than we are. So I think we just leave the number that's the state number definition, and you guys decide if it's somebody that's not full time, they're not full time. That you lay it out there. We're not going to come look. So but I don't think we can change the government definition of what's seasonal.
Chris down here.
Go ahead, Chris.
One last topic, Chris, with vector control. Let's say you make all these changes and put everything in play, and a government agency decides not to follow along. What happens?
State law is subject to the provisions of this chapter, and the provisions of the chapter I'm positive without having them here, but I'm sure they provide penalties for the governmental entity just as well as anybody else, because it's the state law.
Change regulations.
Pardon me?
Well, you know how some government agencies are, not ours, but I mean, I have seen, currently I'm working in Mojave County, setting up a mosquito abatement program, and, they are not as up to speed as our government agency and our state. And I've just seen some things where they would just say, well, we're not gonna follow that. So I was just curious as to make sure that you have something in place to make sure that, as I was told, some government agencies have dropped their certifications and are ignoring it, that you have the ability to make sure that all of them do what you're requesting them to do.
There are provisions in place. It's a catch-all, and it catches all of the NRSs. If there's not a specific penalty, it's a catch-all.
Yeah. And just to let you know, we certainly don't want to go there, and I don't think it'll be an issue with any of them. The amount of money that we're talking about here is insignificant, and the rest of it is safety issues, and I think they open themselves up to a lot of liability. So if they're not going to follow safety issues, they're really going to have, I think, liability issues. But there are other provisions, as Scott just said, in terms of enforcement within the chapter. So,
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
I know some of the issues that Chuck Moses has had in the past, and maybe this relates back to it. Does it become an EPA type of thing? My question is, if an entity is supposed to license to do pest control work, and let's say there's somebody that's out there, an unlicensed person that's found themselves out for hire, it's not based off of our fines and restrictions. It's off of the EPA ones. Then at that point, isn't it? Or does this fall under 555 when an entity that is required to license does not license? That's under 555, is it not, or is it under Chuck?
Well, right at this point in time, it is not. That was what Fridays was all about.
That's what I thought. Okay.
We want to extend the penalties to unlicensed, uncertified individuals that violate a pesticide label. Currently, that has to go to EPA.
Correct. And so
as soon as the temporary regs become temporary and then ultimately permanent, we will be covering those unlicensed, uncertified individuals under our current penalty regulations.
Right, and so then if there was a government entity out there that, if this all went through and it passed, that decided they didn't want to abide by what the law was, then they would fall under all the fines and penalties that would be associated with that as well, correct?
Correct.
Right. Chris, there was some talk previously about the fees. The amount of fees that are involved here right now, the way we're interpreting this is the one government certificate, presuming we keep that. I think we're going to have that discussion, but presuming we keep it, there's one government agency certificate. There's one person per category, or maybe multiple people, depending on how you want to do business. But one person, you already licensed yours from what you've told us, so that would have no fiscal impact on you. There's a possibility if we end up going with the suggestion of having a certificate for every person on a crew, there might be some minimal fee there, but it sounded like your crews are relatively small numbers. NDOT's the big one, and NDOT's the one that will fight certificates on crews for sure. So the fees, I don't know, what's the current PCO?
250.
250?
Wait, 250 is for the business, correct, Scott?
Correct.
And then how much is each applicator?
50.
Okay.
But there'd be one or at least one license. They might have 5, but whatever. That'd be it. We're talking about $500, something like that.
Yeah.
Versus what we pay right now, 40 or 45 every 4 years. Isn't that our fee right now? Is that what I'm hearing?
And certification is 50 for every 4 years.
Yeah, so now we're gonna be increased to about $500 to operate versus the 50 that we've been going under. So there's a big.
We'll talk about the time frame of the certificates and see where we're at. We haven't decided that. I don't know if it's.
It doesn't fall under in our SSL or NAC.
Yeah, it's in the NAC, so we'll talk about those.
Well, and back to fee structures, that's part of the issue that my attorneys had, was that, you know, we have contracts in place through the union that tool allowances, license, you know, the government pays certain things, but in our situation, since we're certified, they don't cover that. So in my yearly budget, I add some money in the training budget that then I can then usually get a check to Scott for every 4 years. But if we change and the prices go up, you know, then we're gonna have to look, I'm gonna have to go back before, you know, our HR and see if I can get the language changed where the county will cover the licensing, and then we'll have to go to the union to negotiate that as a benefit, because currently it's not a benefit. So we're currently right now starting the negotiations of our new SEIU contract, and that's why it's so important that I'm here till I get the month, so that I can get them before the union and go, okay, look, you're gonna need to negotiate a benefit for vector control staff, because we have them at the airports, we have similar staff in our parks and rec. So we're talking about 6 different job classifications that we would have to negotiate a benefit with the union. So that was part of why I asked about, you know, did we have some preliminary hearings, and I'm glad this one went the way it did, because now tomorrow I can go back and I can start the conversation with our HR and with our union.
Right, and so Chris, and I think, you know, it's a valid point that you bring there. I think, you know, as this progresses forward and we start getting the NAC aspect of it, if this gets adopted, you know, really we're concerned with safety. We're not concerned as an agency on profiting from this, or you know sticking it to all the different entities for, you know, $50 every year as opposed to 4 years or something like that. So we'll probably be looking at, you know, government entities being different in the licensing cycle than what it is for private ones that hold themselves out for pest control work. So you know, if it goes to a certificate, I can see it being along the same lines as what we've already done with restricted use pesticides, and being, you know, a 4-year. What is it being recommended now? It's 4-year through.
Recommended 3 is currently 4.
Recommended 3 or 4 year, wherever that's going to be. You know, not asking the government entities to license every year, but extending it. That's something that we're going to have to look at as we start to write the NACs if this gets approved. But I think that would be reasonable. I just don't know where that sits out.
No, I agree, Robert.
So quick question, Brett, Department of Ag. So I guess regarding the exam, getting detailed with the exam part of it, that will probably be in the NAC. Now that I'm understanding, that's more the detail, not the authority. So you know, as Scott mentioned, right now we do a lot of restricted use pests. I give a lot of exams. I just did last week to, you know, be, you know, hot shot crew or a fire crew, you know, to keep them on longer. And I don't know if they're going to be applying restricted use pesticides, but so yeah, I guess now we're kind of going back to the kind of certificate. So it would be maybe a government certificate, not a license, but it'd be similar to what we have now already, like a 50-page or 50-question, bunch of different categories. Maybe it'll be a little longer or a little harder, right? I think it's my understanding. Or can we just add on to our current RUP so it's both, so you don't have to get 2 different tests if you wanted to do RUPs and then the government agency
So
exams?
a lot of our government entities take our restricted,
Right.
and Scott already covered this, take the restricted use one because that's all we had to offer at the time.
Right.
So moving forward, those that, very few government entities are actually using restricted use pesticides as far as I know.
Right.
And so your government entities that are going to be going for their certificate are going to have a course that's designed to be more for general use.
Yeah.
Then they will be taking the test on whatever categories it is that they'll be applying in. If it's going to be urban and structural, which I doubt, or whatever it is, that's the test they would be taking them as they do for the restricted use.
Okay.
So you're going to have a general use test, you're going to have a general use course and tests, and a restricted use course and tests. Government entities that are going to be that do apply restricted use pesticides, Scott, would they have to then hold both
That's what I just want.
certificates?
Yeah. Yep, that's what I was
As
saying.
of right now, yes, because we don't know what the feds are doing.
Yeah.
So,
I think
we
it's-
split them out so that,
Yeah, that's what I'm
there's
saying.
some, like Clark County School District does not use restricted use pesticides at all.
Correct.
So there's no reason for them to even think about having a blue restricted use card. Now, Chris and his crew, they do use restricted use pesticides. So currently they would have both. They would have the restricted use certificate to cover the restricted use products, and then they would have the general use certification, license, whatever it is, to do business in the state.
Let's say we do this then, just throwing it out there, and this is all up for discussion when we write the NACs, of course. But if we give a course that does general use, and it's for government entities and whoever else we decide qualifies for that, they go through that course. For those who identify, hey, we're going to be using restricted use, can they have an additional add-on to that course then? Let's say they get another 30 minutes on proper ways to handle, because you're going to get a lot of the same information in a general or a restricted use course, but you're going to have additional information that you would get out of a restricted use. Can we just add on like another hour topic that they'd have to get? Then they would qualify for both. And again, this is NAC down the road, but just something to think about.
So the issue that we have is our certification program needs to be approved by EPA.
Right.
Currently, we don't know if we're going to be equivalent or not to the federal standard. So this is also going to put our primary principles in jeopardy because we may not be able to meet the federal requirement where we currently allow primary principles to be certified. So we may actually have to pull that part back, and anybody who wants to go, because of the continuing education aspect.
Right.
The feds are looking at category specific. We don't have, number 1 hour in some categories of CEUs, much less 3 hours per recycle. So there's going to be some areas that we're not going to be able to meet the federal requirement under our current certification / licensing primary principle applicators. So I didn't want to say that government applicators would be automatically certified because I don't know that we're going to be able to get equivalency at the federal level, nor are we going to be able to provide the continuing education requirement for the new certification federal certificates. So I didn't want to say anything about that. If you look at the BDR as it's written, it says that if you want restricted use, you got to follow what that guideline is.
Okay. So have we written this in?
Drawn out thing, but I'm not sure that.
So have we written this in a way that then gives us the ability to catch up with the feds once they come up with a game plan of how they want to go with it? In the NRS, have we given ourselves enough flexibility, like we like to do in NRS, to interpret and then codify it in NAC on however that's going to move once we get it handed down from EPA?
Take a look at section 9, number 3. I think it's if we say that they will be in NAC, then I think we're covered. If we say we won't, I think we're covered. I think either way we look at it, number 3 gives the flexibility depending on how we write the restricted use certification provisions.
I got a question.
Yeah, Charles.
Charles was working in pest control. This is directed at Scott. Are you saying that the feds have requirements for restricted use as opposed to control?
Correct. So
that's what you're saying.
You know, I wish Chuck was here, but we have to submit to the feds our certification plan every so many years. And they look at it and they determine whether the state is compliant with the federal requirements of the certification program. Currently, the feds are changing that requirement quite drastically. And we don't know what the final rules are going to be, nor do we know if our state plan is going to be equivalent to the federal plan. So, you know, I can't say a whole lot about how that's going to work. I mean, it's really in a time of flux right now.
Okay. Well, I agree with Scott, though. I think the way that you've written it gives us the ability to kind of, you know, go one way or the other in NAC once it comes down, as long as we've got it addressed here in Section 3. Do we think we need to adapt it at all, or are you happy with the way it is?
Section
not Section 3, Section 9, Sub 3, sorry.
Personally, I think it's good. I don't know that, because if we decide to give government applicators automatic certification, then I think we can do that just like we do with the primary principal licensees. That's all covered in NAC.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
Wow. It's 12:40. You don't have to close it or anything. Does anybody else have anything else they want to add, or have we kind of covered it? Like we said, we're going to revise based off of everything that was discussed today. We're going to go back and we're going to revise some of this language and then have another one of these meetings in the near future here to try to get it all on the same page before this actually goes in front of legislature. So if you get back later today and you go, you know what, I was thinking about this, please feel free to send us a comment or give us a call. Hopefully, Len, what do you think? The next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll probably schedule for this again. Probably 3 weeks, just to give us enough time to do this, and then get a meeting scheduled. Probably be closer to 3 weeks. Probably sometime before Thanksgiving would be my best guess.
Yeah, maybe a push, but yes.
Yeah. So that's what we'll be shooting for.
Yeah, that or very shortly thereafter, I would think.
Yeah.
We've got Veterans Day, we've got Nevada Day, and we've got Thanksgiving 2 days.
Yeah.
So it may be tough.
It's going to be tough, but we're going to go forward as quickly as we can. That being said, anybody else have anything else that they want to add at the end here?
Scott, we put this on hold. Are we going to come back to it?
Which one?
The NAC.
So Charles's question is, are we going to come back to the NACs? Yes, I think the Pest Control Association needs to take a look at it. They're going to get with Robert or me, and then we'll reschedule another workshop for that.
That is correct, and they said it would be they're going to get back to us sometime at the beginning of the month of November, so by the 1st of November, they will come back with their edits, and this is on the workshop that we did last week, so it's kind of separate from this conversation, but and we will schedule a follow-up workshop on those NAC changes after that. All right, I think that's it. Thank you everybody who came. I know a lot of people had to take off. This went a little bit long, but I think we had some really good discussion, and look forward to having more really good discussion. So thank you everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Listening to us.
How's it going, Britt?
Good. How are you?
How are your children?
Good.
They're not as little as they were right now.
It's just grown fast.
Did me.
Just go in the right direction.
What do we need to do? That's what we're gonna find out right now. I'm calling them.
Still, neonatal postpartum, labor, okay, something.
Yeah, same.
It's all kind of related.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's the educator there for a while.
Sensible if that goes through.
Chris.
I have an IUP.
You guys good?
Dental graduate,
5 years.
similar experience. He really has not enjoyed it. He's a homebody. Likes to be home, work, fix stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
So he's looking forward to it.
with that.